You're lying in bed right now, maybe scrolling through videos, looking for something to help you sleep, and you stumbled on this title about Neanderthals and humans, about why we survived when they didn't. Here's the thing. This isn't really a story about Neanderthals. It's a story about you, about what makes you human, about the thing that separates us from every other species that ever walked this planet, including our closest cousins, the ones who are stronger than us, smarter in some ways, better adapted to survive. They had bigger brains, stronger bodies. They'd lived in Europe for 200,000 years before we even showed up. They knew the land, they knew the animals, they knew how to survive ice ages that would have killed us in weeks, and yet, they're gone. We're here. Why? That's the mystery we're going to explore tonight. And I'm warning you now, the answer isn't what you think. It's not about intelligence. It's not about tools. It's not about some magic mutation that made us special. It's about something stranger. Something that happened around 50,000 years ago. Something that changed everything. If this is playing while you fall asleep, that's kind of the point. You can subscribe, and if you feel like it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Modern humans appeared 300,000 years ago. Our brains were the same size they are now. Our bodies looked exactly like they do today. But for 250,000 years we left almost nothing behind. No art, no jewelry, no culture. Nothing that would tell you we were different from any other animal trying to survive. The hardware was there, but something was missing. Then something changed. Nobody knows exactly what. But around 50,000 years ago, humans started doing things they'd never done before. They started making art, creating symbols, building networks that stretched across continents. They started thinking in ways that no creature had ever thought before. And once that switch flipped, nothing could stop us. We spread across the entire planet in just 40,000 years. We crossed oceans, climbed mountains, survived deserts and tundra and rainforests. We outlasted ice ages and droughts and volcanic winters. We outlasted the Neanderthals. We outlasted every other human species that ever existed. Not because we were stronger. We weren't. Not because we were smarter. We might not have been. But because of something else. Something that's still inside you right now. Something that's working even as you drift off to sleep. Even as your conscious mind shuts down and your brain starts doing the strange work that only human brains can do. So what was it? What happened 50,000 years ago? What makes you different from a Neanderthal who could crush your skull with one hand? That's what we're here to figure out. Let's talk about who they actually were. The Neanderthals. Not the caveman stereotype. Not the grunting brute you see in cartoons. The real thing. First, the brain. Neanderthal brains were bigger than yours, not slightly bigger, significantly bigger. The average Neanderthal brain was about 1,500 cubic centimeters. Yours is about 1,350. That's a 10% difference. That's huge. Does bigger mean smarter? Not necessarily. Whales have massive brains. So do elephants. Brain size matters less than brain structure. But still, the Neanderthals weren't working with less. They were working with more. Their skulls were different from ours. Lower, longer, with these massive brow ridges that stuck out over their eyes. But inside that skull, everything you'd need for complex thought, language centers, planning centers, memory centers, all there, all developed. They had the hardware. Now, the body. Imagine someone built for pure survival, short, stocky, barrel-chested, arms like tree trunks. Neanderthals were about 5'5" on average, but they weighed as much as a modern human who's 6 feet tall. All muscle, all bone density, built like wrestlers. Their bones were thicker than ours, way thicker. When archaeologists find Neanderthal skeletons, the bones are so dense they feel wrong. Too heavy. Like they're made of different material, and they needed that density because their muscles were insane. Look at the attachment points where muscles connected to bone. You can see the stress marks, the ridges where massive muscles pulled and pulled and pulled for decades. These weren't gym muscles, these were functional muscles. The kind you get from breaking rocks and carrying dead animals and climbing cliffs and fighting for your life. One researcher tried to calculate their strength based on bone thickness and muscle attachment points, his estimate. A Neanderthal could probably bench press about 500 pounds without training, just naturally. You know what's crazy? Their hands. Neanderthal hands were huge, thick fingers, massive thumbs, but incredibly precise. We know because of the tools they made, stone tools that required fine motor control, delicate flaking, careful pressure. You can't make those tools with clumsy hands. So they had the strength of a gorilla and the dexterity of a surgeon, both at once. Their faces were different too. That's what you'd notice first if you saw one. The nose was massive, wide and projecting, built to warm freezing air before it hit the lungs. The jaw stuck out. No chin like we have, just a sloping jaw that connected to a neck thick as a fire hydrant. But the eyes were human, same size as ours, same placement. If you looked into a Neanderthal's eyes, you'd see something you recognized, something looking back. Now here's what they could do. They made fire, not just used it, made it. That's huge. Making fire from scratch is hard. It requires planning, understanding of materials, knowledge of technique. They had all that. They made tools, not just rocks they picked up, actual designed tools, the Mousterian tradition. That's what archaeologists call it. Neanderthals would take a rock and visualize the tool inside it. Then they'd chip away everything that wasn't the tool, flake by flake, following a pattern they held in their minds. That takes abstract thinking. You have to see something that doesn't exist yet. Hold it in your imagination, then make the real world match your imagination. That's not simple. They made different tools for different jobs. Scrapers for hides, points for spears, knives for cutting. Each one designed for its purpose. Each one made with care, and they took care of each other. We know this from the bones, from the injuries that healed. There's a Neanderthal skeleton from a wreck, Shanidar one. He lived to about 40 years old, which was old for them. But here's the thing, he was a mess. His right arm was withered, probably from birth, useless. His right eye was damaged, maybe blind. He had injuries all over his body, healed fractures, worn joints. This guy was falling apart, and yet he lived to 40 in the Ice Age with one arm. How? Someone fed him. Someone protected him. Someone kept him alive for decades, even though he couldn't hunt, couldn't fight, couldn't do the things Neanderthals needed to do to survive. That's not instinct. That's compassion. That's culture. They buried their dead. We're pretty sure. There's debate about this, but several Neanderthal skeletons have been found in what look like deliberate graves, bodies positioned carefully, sometimes with objects nearby. Maybe grave goods, maybe not. But even if they didn't bury their dead with ceremony, they at least moved the bodies, put them somewhere. That shows awareness. That shows they understood death as something different from sleep, something final. They used pigments, red ochre, manganese dioxide, ground into powder. We find it at their sites, on their tools, sometimes on shells with holes drilled through them, like beads, like jewellery. What were they doing with pigments? We don't know. Maybe body painting, maybe decorating hides, maybe marking territory. But they were doing something symbolic, something beyond pure survival. They lived in Europe for 200,000 years. Let that sink in. 200,000 years. Modern humans have only been doing civilization for about 10,000 years. Neanderthals survived in Ice Age Europe for 20 times longer than we've had cities. They survived glaciers advancing and retreating. They survived temperature swings that would empty Europe of almost all life. They survived megafauna that could kill you in seconds. Cave bears, cave lions, woolly rhinos, giant hyenas. And they didn't just survive, they thrived. They spread from Spain to Siberia. They adapted to forests and grasslands and mountains and coasts. They figured out how to live in places that would kill an unprepared human in one night. They hunted big game. We know from the isotope analysis of their bones, Neanderthals ate meat, lots of it, mostly from large animals, reindeer, bison, horses, sometimes mammoth. Hunting mammoth with stone-tipped spears. Think about that. A mammoth weighs 6 tons, has tusks that can gore you, skin thick as leather armor, and you're going after it with a wooden stick and a rock. That takes courage, coordination, planning, communication. You can't hunt mammoth alone. You need a group. You need strategy. You need everyone doing their part so they could communicate. Had to. Whether it was full language like ours, we don't know. But they could share information, make plans, coordinate actions. That requires some form of language. Their throats were shaped differently from ours. The hyoid bone, the larynx, positioned in a way that might have limited their vocal range. But they could make sounds. They could speak. Maybe not with our full range. Maybe not with our speed. But they could talk. They probably sang. There's a flute made from a cave bear bone, found in Slovenia, about 50,000 years old, right in Neanderthal territory, right in Neanderthal. Time, it has holes, deliberately made, positioned for fingers. Maybe they made it. Maybe early humans made it. We don't know for sure, but someone was making music, and Neanderthals were there. Music requires abstract thinking, rhythm, pattern, memory, emotional expression, all the things that make us human. They lived in small groups, maybe 10 to 30 individuals, extended families. They stayed together, moved together, hunted together, raised children together. We know they had childhood, long childhood, like us. Neanderthal kids didn't mature fast. They took years to grow up. Their brains developed slowly. That means they needed care, protection, teaching. That means they had culture to pass down. Knowledge that took time to learn. Skills that required practice. Stories, maybe. Traditions. Ways of doing things that got handed from one generation to the next. So here's what we know for sure. Neanderthals were strong, smart, skilled, compassionate, cultural. They had everything they needed to survive, everything they needed to thrive. They had language, tools, fire, art, music maybe, burial practices, care for the sick, everything that supposedly makes us special, and they'd been doing it for 200,000 years, successfully. In one of the harshest environments on Earth. So why aren't they here? Why did they disappear? Why did we survive when they had every advantage? That's the question. That's the mystery. Because when you look at what Neanderthals actually were, when you see past the stereotype to the reality, you realize something unsettling. They weren't that different from us. They weren't primitive. They weren't stupid. They weren't brutish. They were human. Just a different kind of human. A human built for a different world. A human who'd figured out how to survive that world for longer than we've existed. And then we showed up. And everything changed. There's something perfect about falling asleep to human history. These aren't just stories. They're your stories, your ancestors, your deep past, the people who survived so you could be here, listening, breathing, drifting. So let that happen. Let the words wash over you. You don't need to remember everything. You don't need to stay awake. That's not the point. The point is the drift, the slow fade, the gentle pull of sleep. Let it take you. Around 300,000 years ago, a new type of human appeared in Africa. They looked different from Neanderthals, taller, more slender, lighter bones, smaller faces, higher foreheads, chins that stuck out. If you saw one walking down a street today, you wouldn't look twice. We call them anatomically modern humans, but that's a terrible name. Let's just call them what they were. Us. Early versions of us. Their brains were the same size as ours, same shape, same structure. If you could scan one with an MRI, you'd see the same parts we have, the same wiring, the same potential. But here's what's strange. For the first 190,000 years, they didn't act like us. They made tools, simple ones, sharp flakes of stone, hand axes, the same designs their ancestors made, the same designs Neanderthals made. Nothing special, nothing new. They didn't make art. No cave paintings, no carved figures, no beads or jewellery, nothing decorative, nothing that said, I made this because it's beautiful. They didn't bury their dead with ceremony. Sometimes they buried them, sometimes they didn't. No grave goods, no flowers, no signs they believed in anything beyond death. They lived in small groups, maybe 20 people, maybe 30. They moved around, followed the food, survived. That was it. For 190,000 years. Think about that number. 190,000 years. That's longer than we've had agriculture. Longer than we've had cities. Longer than we've had writing. Longer than recorded history by a factor of 30. Modern humans existed for 190,000 years before they started acting modern. The hardware was there. The brain was ready. But something was missing. Archaeologists call this the problem of behavioural modernity. When did humans start being human? Not just looking human, acting human, thinking human, creating human. The evidence is scattered, confusing, full of false starts. Around 100,000 years ago, in a cave in South Africa called Blombos Cave, someone made something strange. They took a piece of red ochre, a soft, iron-rich rock, and they carved lines into it. Crosshatch patterns, deliberate, geometric, repeated. It's the oldest known abstract design. Someone made it. Someone saw it. Someone understood it meant something. But then nothing. For thousands of years, nothing like it appears again. Around 90,000 years ago, also in South Africa, someone made beads. They drilled holes through tiny shells, strung them together, wore them, showed them off. Beads mean something. They mean, I want to look different. They mean, I belong to this group. They mean I care what others think. They mean social complexity, identity, culture. But then that disappears too, for thousands of years. Around 75,000 years ago, a supervolcano erupted in Indonesia, Mount Toba, the largest eruption in 2 million years. It threw so much ash into the atmosphere that global temperatures dropped. Some scientists think it nearly wiped out humanity. Genetic evidence suggests the human population crashed to maybe 10,000 people. maybe less. We almost went extinct, but we didn't. We survived. And something changed after that. Nobody knows if the volcano caused it. Maybe the crisis forced innovation. Maybe it was just coincidence. Around 70,000 years ago, the evidence starts to shift. Stone tools get more sophisticated, not just sharp flakes, blades, long thin pieces struck off a core, more efficient, more versatile. You can get more cutting edge from the same amount of stone. Bone tools appear, needles, awls, harpoons. You can't make those without planning, without precision, without caring about the details. Long-distance trade networks develop. Shells from the coast show up hundreds of miles inland. Obsidian from volcanic regions travels across continents. Stone from specific quarries ends up in camps far away. Someone was moving, someone was trading, someone was connecting, and the art starts to appear, not just in one place, everywhere. Cave paintings in Europe, rock engravings in Australia, carved figures in Africa, beads, pendants, decorated tools. Something clicked, something spread, something changed in how humans thought and acted. By 50,000 years ago, modern humans were on the move. They left Africa, not the first time. Earlier groups had tried. Homo erectus made it to Asia. Early modern humans reached the Middle East around 100,000 years ago but didn't go further. This time was different. This time they kept going. They moved into the Middle East, into Europe, into Asia, into Australia. They crossed oceans, they crossed deserts, they crossed mountains, they adapted to every environment they found, and they brought their culture with them. By 45,000 years ago, modern humans were in Europe, Neanderthal territory. The two species had met before in the Middle East. They'd even interbred. We know because we carry Neanderthal DNA. 1 to 4% of the genome of everyone outside Africa comes from Neanderthals. So they met, they mated, they mixed, but they didn't merge. The modern humans who entered Europe were different from the ones who'd tried before. They had better tools, more varied tools, specialized tools for specific tasks. They had art. They carved ivory into animal figures. They painted cave walls with horses and bison and handprints. They made musical instruments, flutes carved from bird bones and mammoth ivory. They had complex social structures, large groups, extended networks. They traded across vast distances. They shared information. They built on each other's innovations. They had language. We can't prove this directly. Language doesn't fossilize. But the art suggests it. The complexity suggests it. The speed of innovation suggests it. You can't coordinate a mammoth hunt with 30 people without sophisticated communication. You can't pass on tool-making techniques without language. You can't create symbolic art without words to explain what the symbols mean. Modern humans could talk to each other in ways Neanderthals probably couldn't. That's not saying Neanderthals were stupid. They weren't. They had a language of some kind. They had culture. They had tools. But the modern human version was different, more flexible, more generative, more able to create new ideas and share them rapidly. Think about what language does. It lets you talk about things that aren't here, things in the past, things in the future, things that might happen, things that never happened, things you imagine. It lets you plan. Tomorrow we'll go to the valley. You take the left side, I'll take the right. We'll drive the deer toward the cliff. It lets you teach. Hold the stone this way. Strike it at this angle. See how the flake comes off? Now you try. It lets you tell stories. My grandfather's grandfather saw a mammoth trapped in a pit. They killed it, fed the whole group for a month. There used to be a pit like that near the river. Maybe we could dig one. Stories carry knowledge, they carry wisdom, they carry culture, they let each generation build on the last. Modern humans had that, Neanderthals had some of it, but not all of it, not the same way. The modern humans who entered Europe around 45,000 years ago brought a toolkit that was both physical and mental. Better weapons, better organization, better communication, better ability to adapt and innovate. They didn't have to be stronger than Neanderthals. They didn't have to be tougher. They just had to be different. And they were, in ways that would matter, in ways that would tip the balance, in ways that would determine who survived and who disappeared. The stage was set. Both species in the same place, competing for the same resources, living in the same caves, hunting the same animals. For thousands of years they coexisted, they overlapped, they shared the landscape, but one species was expanding, growing, innovating, spreading. The other was shrinking, retreating, holding on. The story of what happened next isn't simple. It's not a war, it's not a genocide. It's not a single event. It's a slow process, a gradual shift, a tipping point reached over millennia. But the outcome was inevitable, written in the differences between them, written in their tools and their art and their ability to adapt. One species would inherit the earth. The other would vanish. And the difference between survival and extinction would come down to things you couldn't see. Things in their minds, things in their culture, things in how they thought and communicated and worked together. The modern humans had something new, something powerful, something that would change everything. The meeting happened slowly, over thousands of years, in caves and river valleys, in forests and on open plains. Two species of humans, same genus, different paths, finally crossing. We don't know exactly when they first saw each other. The archaeological record doesn't capture moments like that. It captures stone tools and bones and fire pits. Not first contact, not the look in their eyes when they realized they weren't alone. But we know it happened. We know because of what they left behind, and we know because of what's inside us. Around 50,000 years ago, modern humans were moving out of Africa into the Middle East, following coastlines, following rivers, following food. They weren't the first humans to leave Africa. Homo erectus did it 2 million years ago. Early modern humans tried around 100,000 years ago. But this wave was different. This wave kept going. They moved north, into what's now Israel and Lebanon, into Turkey, into the Caucasus Mountains, and there, in caves and valleys, they found signs, stone tools that weren't theirs, fire pits still warm, bones with cut marks, evidence of other people. Neanderthals had been there for 200,000 years. It was their territory, their hunting grounds, their home. The two groups met. We know this for certain, not from stories, not from guesses, from DNA. In 2010, scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome. They took DNA from bones tens of thousands of years old, pieced it together, compared it to modern human DNA, and found something unexpected. Everyone outside Africa carries Neanderthal DNA. 1 to 4% of your genome, if your ancestors came from Europe or Asia or the Americas, comes from Neanderthals. The DNA is real. The mixing happened. Modern humans and Neanderthals didn't just meet, they mated. They had children together. Those children survived, had children of their own, passed the DNA down for 50,000 years. To you, think about what that means. These weren't different species in the way we usually think of species. They could have children together, fertile children, children who fit into human society, children who survived and thrived. The genetic evidence tells us when it happened. The interbreeding occurred between 50,000 and 60,000 years ago, probably in the Middle East, probably in multiple encounters over thousands of years, not a single event, a long, slow mixing. But here's what's strange. The DNA only goes one way. Neanderthals contributed to us, but we didn't contribute much to them. The Neanderthal genome shows very little modern human DNA, maybe none. The mixing was mostly modern human men with Neanderthal women, or the children stayed with modern human groups, or something else we don't understand. The genetics tell us they met, they mixed, but they didn't merge. They remained separate. Two populations, two cultures, two ways of being human. So what did that meeting look like? What happened when a band of modern humans came over a ridge and saw Neanderthals in the valley below? Or when Neanderthals found modern humans camped by a river they'd used for generations? Nobody knows. We can only imagine. But we can make educated guesses based on what we know about both groups. They probably recognized each other as human. Different, but human. Neanderthals were shorter, stockier, stronger. Faces that projected forward, big noses, heavy brow ridges, but they walked upright, used tools, controlled fire, wore clothes. They were clearly people. Modern humans were taller, more slender, lighter build, smaller faces, higher foreheads, prominent chins, different, but not alien, not animals, people. They probably tried to communicate, gestures, sounds, showing each other's tools, sharing food, the universal language of "I'm not a threat." Maybe some encounters were hostile, competition for resources, territory, hunting grounds. Maybe there were conflicts, fights, deaths. The archaeological record shows violence existed. Both species have bones with healed injuries from weapons. Both knew how to hurt each other. But violence couldn't have been the norm. You don't interbreed with someone you're constantly fighting. You don't have children with enemies. The DNA evidence suggests peaceful contact, at least sometimes, at least enough. Maybe some encounters were curious, watching each other from a distance, observing, learning, seeing how the other group hunted, what tools they used, how they made fire, where they camped. Both groups were smart. Both could learn. Neanderthals saw modern human tools and might have copied them. Modern humans saw Neanderthal techniques and might have adopted them. There's archaeological evidence of this. Tool styles that seem to cross between groups, techniques that spread. Maybe some encounters were economic, trade, exchange. Modern humans had shells from the coast. Neanderthals had flint from local quarries. Why not trade? Why not benefit both groups? There's evidence of long-distance trade networks in modern human sites, shells and stones moving hundreds of miles. Maybe some of that trade involved Neanderthals. Maybe they were part of the network, at least at first, and some encounters were clearly intimate. The DNA proves it. Modern humans and Neanderthals had relationships, had children, raised those children together or at least accepted them into the group. What did these relationships look like? We'll never know. Were they love, convenience, necessity, curiosity? Did a modern human woman stay with a Neanderthal band? Did a Neanderthal woman join a modern human group? Did they communicate? Did they understand each other? The children would have looked mixed. Some Neanderthal features, some modern human features, maybe stronger than modern humans but lighter than Neanderthals. Maybe they fit in. Maybe they stood out. Maybe they were special. Maybe they were normal. Those hybrid children survived. The DNA proves it. They weren't sterile. They weren't rejected. They had children of their own. They became part of the human lineage, part of us. But the mixing stopped. After a few thousand years, the genetic evidence shows no new Neanderthal DNA entering the modern human genome. The populations separated, drew apart, stopped interbreeding. Why? Nobody knows for sure. Maybe the populations diverged geographically. Modern humans moved into new territories. Neanderthals stayed in their traditional ranges. Less contact meant less mixing. Maybe cultural differences grew. Modern humans developed new traditions, new languages, new social structures. The differences became too great. The groups couldn't communicate anymore, couldn't connect, or maybe something darker happened. Maybe competition increased, resources became scarce. The groups that had once traded and mixed became rivals, enemies. The violence we see hints of in the archaeological record became more common. By 45,000 years ago, modern humans were in Europe, deep in Neanderthal territory, not just the Middle East, not just the edges, the heartland, France, Spain, Germany, Italy. Places Neanderthals had lived for 200,000 years. The two populations overlapped, shared the landscape, lived in the same regions, hunted the same animals, used the same caves, sometimes at the same time, sometimes taking turns. Sometimes one group would live in a cave, leave, and the other group would move in. At a site called Grotte des Fées in France, archaeologists found layers, Neanderthal tools, then modern human tools, then Neanderthal tools again, then modern human tools, back and forth, over thousands of years, the same cave, different occupants, taking turns. Were they avoiding each other? Did one group leave when the other arrived? Or were they there at different seasons? Neanderthals in winter, modern humans in summer, sharing without meeting. Or maybe they did meet. Maybe they knew each other. Maybe. The Neanderthals who left the cave in spring knew the modern humans would arrive. Maybe they'd seen them before. Maybe they'd even talked. The archaeological evidence shows both groups living in close proximity, within miles of each other, sometimes in the same valleys, sometimes using the same resources, but the evidence doesn't show them living together. No mixed camps, no shared sites, no blended cultures. They coexisted, but separately, like neighbours who share a fence but never share a meal. And during this time, something was changing. The balance was shifting. Modern humans were growing in number, spreading, innovating, creating new tools, new techniques, new art, new ways of living. Neanderthals were holding steady, doing what they'd always done, making the same tools, living the same way, surviving, but not expanding, not changing. The meeting between modern humans and Neanderthals wasn't a single event, it was a process. Thousands of years, thousands of encounters, some peaceful, some violent, some intimate, some distant. But the outcome was already being written, in the differences between them, in their tools and their culture and their ability to adapt, in things you couldn't see just by looking, things in their minds, things in how they organized, things in how they thought about the future. The modern humans who entered Europe brought more than just themselves. They brought a way of being human that was different, more connected, more innovative, more flexible, more able to change with changing circumstances. They didn't have to destroy the Neanderthals. They didn't have to fight them. They just had to be different. Different in ways that mattered. Different in ways that gave them an edge. A small edge. But over thousands of years, a small edge is enough. The meeting was the beginning of the end. Not because of what happened in any single encounter, but because of what those encounters revealed. two ways of being human, two strategies for survival. Both had worked for hundreds of thousands of years. But the world was changing, the climate was shifting, resources were moving, and in a changing world, flexibility matters, innovation matters, the ability to adapt matters. Modern humans had that. Neanderthals didn't. Not enough. Not the same way. The meeting showed it, made it visible, put the two strategies side by side, and over time one strategy would prove better suited for what was coming, better suited for survival, better suited for inheritance of the earth. The modern humans and Neanderthals met, mixed, coexisted. And then, slowly, one group began to fade while the other flourished. Not because of any single thing, but because of everything. All the small differences, all the tiny advantages, all the ways they were different adding up over millennia. The meeting was just the beginning. The real story was what happened next. How coexistence became competition, how competition became replacement, how one species survived while the other disappeared. Here's the thing about population. It might be the simplest explanation, and the hardest one to see. Neanderthals were strong, smart, tough. They survived ice ages. They hunted mammoths. They controlled fire and made tools and buried their dead. They did everything right. But there weren't many of them. Modern humans. There were more of us. A lot more. And in the long run, that might have been the only advantage that mattered. Think about Europe 40,000 years ago. The landscape was huge. Forests and plains and river valleys stretching from Spain to the Urals. Plenty of room. Plenty of animals. Plenty of resources. Neanderthals had lived there for 200,000 years. They knew every valley, every cave, every seasonal migration route of the herds. This was their home, their territory, their world. But they were spread thin. The best estimates suggest maybe 70,000 Neanderthals lived in all of Europe at their peak. Maybe. Some scientists think it was less, way less. Maybe 10,000 to 20,000, scattered across an entire continent. Compare that to modern humans. We don't know exact numbers. We can't. But the evidence suggests modern human populations were larger, maybe 10 times larger, maybe more. Why does this matter? Because numbers create options. Numbers create safety. Numbers create culture. A band of 25 Neanderthals living in a valley had to worry about everything. Hunting, gathering, making tools, raising children, surviving winter. If someone got hurt, the whole group suffered. If someone died, they lost knowledge, skills, experience. There was no backup, no help from the next valley over, because the next valley might be empty, or the group there might be days away. Too far to help, too far to trade with, too far to share knowledge. Neanderthals lived in small, isolated groups. The archaeological evidence shows this. Their tools don't spread far. Their techniques don't travel. Each group seems to do things their own way. Isolated, independent, alone. Modern humans were different, not because they were smarter, not because they were tougher, because there were more of them. More people meant more groups. More groups meant more contact. More contact meant more trade, more ideas, more innovation, more everything. A modern human band of 25 people wasn't alone. There was another band 2 valleys over, and another beyond that, and another, a network, loose, informal, but real. If you needed flint, you could trade for it. If you needed help hunting a big animal, you could ask. If someone in your group died and took their knowledge with them, someone in another group might know the same thing. Population density creates culture. It creates the possibility of specialization, of trade, of shared knowledge, of backup plans. Neanderthals couldn't afford specialists. Everyone had to know everything. How to hunt, how to make tools, how to find plants, how to survive. There was no room for someone who was just really good at making spear points. Everyone had to be generalists. Modern humans had more flexibility. In a larger population, someone could focus on making the best spear points. Someone else could focus on tracking. Someone else on gathering. Specialization makes everyone better at what they do. And here's the thing about population. It compounds. It builds on itself. A larger population is more stable. If a winter is harsh and some people die, the population can recover. There are enough people left to rebuild, to have children, to pass on knowledge. A small population is fragile. One bad winter, one epidemic, one run of bad luck, and suddenly you're below the threshold. Not enough people to maintain the group, not enough genetic diversity, not enough knowledge to pass on. Neanderthals were always close to that edge. The genetic evidence shows it. Their DNA has less diversity than modern humans, way less. They went through population bottlenecks, times, when the numbers dropped so low that only a few groups survived. Genetic diversity collapsed, and never fully recovered. Modern humans had bottlenecks too. We almost went extinct. Around 70,000 years ago, the human population might have dropped to 10,000 people, maybe less. A volcanic eruption, climate change, something nearly wiped us out. But we recovered. We bounced back. By 40,000 years ago, we were spreading across the world, growing, expanding, thriving. Neanderthals never bounced back. Their population stayed small, stayed fragile, stayed vulnerable. Why? What kept their numbers low? Part of it was biology. Neanderthals had longer childhoods than earlier humans. Their kids took longer to grow up, needed more care, more resources, more time. That's actually a sign of intelligence. Longer childhoods mean more time to learn, more time for the brain to develop, more time to absorb culture and knowledge. But it also means fewer babies. A Neanderthal woman might have a child every 4 or 5 years, maybe longer. Compare that to modern humans. We could have babies faster, every 2 or 3 years, sometimes less. Over thousands of years, that difference adds up. Modern humans could grow their population faster, could recover from setbacks quicker, could expand into new territories with more people. Part of it was also strategy. Neanderthals were ambush hunters. They got close to animals, really close, used thrusting spears, stabbed prey at close range. This worked. They were strong enough to do it, tough enough to survive the injuries. The bones show it. Healed fractures, broken ribs, crushed fingers, the injuries you'd expect from fighting large animals up close. But it was dangerous, really dangerous. Hunting like that, people got hurt, people died. The mortality rate was high, especially for young adults, the people who should have been having children. Modern humans hunted differently. We used throwing spears, atlatls, later bows. We killed from a distance, safer, less risk, fewer injuries. More hunters survive to have children. Population growth isn't just about birth rates, it's about survival rates. Modern humans survived longer, had more children, passed on more knowledge. Part of it was also territory. Neanderthals were adapted to cold climates. They were built for it. Short, stocky, big noses to warm cold air, thick bones, heavy muscles. They were perfect for Ice Age Europe, but that specialization limited them. They couldn't easily move into warmer climates, couldn't expand south, couldn't follow resources when the climate shifted. Modern humans were more flexible. We could live anywhere. Tropics, deserts, mountains, coasts. We adapted culturally instead of physically, made different clothes, different shelters, different tools, whatever the environment needed. That flexibility meant we could expand, move into new territories, find new resources, grow our population in places Neanderthals couldn't go, and here's where it gets interesting. Population size affects innovation. More people means more chances for someone to have a good idea, more chances for that idea to spread, more chances for it to be improved. Modern humans were innovating constantly. New tools, new techniques, new art, new ways of doing everything. The archaeological record shows it. Tool types changing every few thousand years, getting better, getting more sophisticated. Neanderthals were innovating too, but slower, much slower. Their tools stayed the same for tens of thousands of years. Not because they were dumb, because there weren't enough of them. Not enough people to generate ideas, not enough contact to spread them. There's a theory in anthropology, the idea that culture needs a minimum population to sustain itself. Below that threshold, knowledge gets lost, skills disappear, innovation stops. Tasmania shows this. When sea levels rose 10,000 years ago, Tasmania was cut off from Australia. The Aboriginal population there was isolated. Only a few thousand people. Over the next 10,000 years they lost technologies. Bone tools disappeared, fishing stopped, complex tools were abandoned, not because they forgot. Because with such a small population, if the few people who knew a skill died before teaching it, the knowledge was gone forever. Neanderthals might have faced the same problem. Small populations, isolated groups, knowledge that couldn't spread, skills that died with individuals, a slow erosion of culture. Modern humans had the opposite. Growing populations, connected groups, knowledge that spread and built and compounded, each generation adding to what came before. The math is brutal. If modern humans outnumbered Neanderthals 10 to 1, then every advantage modern humans had was multiplied by 10. 10 times as many innovations, 10 times as many good ideas, 10 times as many chances to solve problems, and population creates competition, not just between species, within species. Modern human groups competed with each other for resources, for territory, for status. That competition drove innovation, pushed groups to be better, faster, smarter, more efficient. The best tools spread, the best techniques spread, the best strategies spread. Because groups that didn't adopt them fell behind, lost out, disappeared. Neanderthals didn't have that pressure, not the same way. Their populations were too small, too isolated. There wasn't enough competition to drive rapid change. By 40,000 years ago, the difference was visible. Modern humans were everywhere in Europe. Neanderthals were retreating, pushed into marginal areas, mountains, peninsulas, places modern humans hadn't reached yet. It wasn't a war, it was displacement. Modern humans didn't have to fight. They just had to be there, using resources, hunting animals, occupying the best territories, and there were more of them, always more of them. Neanderthals couldn't compete with numbers. They couldn't outbreed modern humans, couldn't expand fast enough, couldn't innovate fast enough, couldn't adapt fast enough. The population difference created a ratchet effect. Modern humans grew, Neanderthals shrank. And once that process started, it was hard to stop, maybe impossible. Small populations are vulnerable to random chance. A harsh winter kills more people. A disease spreads faster. A drought hits harder. Each setback makes the population smaller, makes the next setback more likely. A spiral. Modern humans had cushion. Enough people to absorb losses, enough groups to maintain culture, enough diversity to adapt, enough children to ensure the future. Neanderthals didn't. They were always on the edge, always vulnerable, always one disaster away from collapse. And the disasters came. Climate change, shifting resources, competition from modern humans, disease, bad luck, all of it hitting a population that couldn't afford to lose anyone. By 30,000 years ago, Neanderthals were down to a few thousand, maybe less. Scattered in isolated pockets, Spain, Croatia, Gibraltar, the last remnants, the final groups. Modern humans kept growing, kept spreading, kept innovating. The population advantage had become overwhelming, unstoppable. This is the theory, the population hypothesis. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic, there's no single moment, no battle, no catastrophe, just math, just numbers, just the slow, grinding reality that more people have more options, more resilience, more future. It might not be the whole answer, probably isn't, but it's part of it. Maybe the biggest part, the foundation that made everything else possible, because you can be smart and strong and tough. You can survive ice ages and hunt mammoths and control fire. But if there aren't enough of you, if you're spread too thin, if you can't maintain the critical mass needed for culture to flourish and grow, then eventually someone else will, someone with more people, more connections, more possibilities. Neanderthals were survivors. They lasted 400,000 years. That's not failure, that's success by any measure. But they were survivors in small numbers. And when they met another group of humans who survived in large numbers, the math took over. Slowly, inevitably, over thousands of years. Numbers matter. Population matters. It might be the simplest answer and the truest one. Here's what's strange. Population explains a lot, but it doesn't explain everything. Because Neanderthals had one advantage we haven't talked about yet. One thing that should have let them compete. One thing that should have kept them alive even with smaller numbers. Food. Neanderthals were better at getting food than we were. Way better. At least at first. Think about what it takes to survive in Ice Age Europe. You need calories, lots of them. The cold burns through energy. Your body works overtime just staying warm. You need fat, protein, constant fuel. Neanderthals were built for this. Their bodies needed more calories than ours, maybe 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day. That's double what most modern humans need, but they could get it. They were incredible hunters. We talked about their hunting style, ambush predators, getting close, using thrusting spears, dangerous, but effective. They hunted everything, mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant deer, cave bears, bison, reindeer. If it was big and had meat, Neanderthals could kill it. The bones show this. Neanderthal sites are full of animal remains, butchered, processed, eaten. They weren't picky. They ate whatever they could catch, and they could catch a lot. Modern humans hunted too, but differently. We threw spears from a distance. Safer, but less reliable. You miss more often. The animal runs away. You go home hungry. Early modern humans in Europe probably struggled at first. The climate was harsh. The animals were huge. The competition was fierce. Neanderthals had been there for 200,000 years. They knew every hunting ground, every animal migration route, every trick. We were the newcomers, the outsiders, learning as we went. So how did we compete? How did we get enough food to not just survive but thrive? To grow our population while theirs shrank? The answer is diversity. We ate everything. Neanderthals were specialists, meat-eaters, almost exclusively. The chemical analysis of their bones proves it. Their diet was 80% to 90% meat, maybe more. They were hypercarnivores, like wolves, like lions. That works when game is plentiful, when the herds are thick, when hunting is good, but when it's not, when the herds migrate, when winter hits hard and animals disappear, you're in trouble. Modern humans were omnivores, true omnivores. We ate meat when we could get it, but we also ate plants, roots, seeds, nuts, berries, fish, shellfish, birds, eggs, insects, everything. The archaeological sites show this. Modern human camps have a wider variety of animal bones, not just big game, small animals too. Rabbits, hares, birds, fish bones, shellfish, evidence of plant processing, grinding stones, hearths with burned seeds. We diversified, spread our risk. If hunting was bad, we gathered. If gathering was slim, we fished. If the fish weren't biting, we found something else. Always something else. This matters more than it sounds. Dietary diversity is survival insurance. It means you're never dependent on one food source, never vulnerable to one failure. Neanderthals put all their calories in one basket: meat. When meat was scarce, they starved. The bones show evidence of this. Periods of malnutrition, stress markers, times when food ran short. Modern humans had backup plans, multiple backup plans. That flexibility kept us fed, kept our population growing, kept us healthy enough to have children. But here's what's really interesting. It's not just what we ate, it's how we got it. Neanderthals hunted individually or in small groups. The evidence suggests groups of maybe 3 to 5 hunters working together, coordinating, but small scale. Modern humans hunted in larger groups, 10, 15, 20 people, coordinated drives, surrounding herds, pushing animals toward cliffs or into box canyons, mass kills. There are sites in France, modern human sites, where hundreds of reindeer were killed at once, driven over cliffs, butchered, the meat processed and stored, enough food to feed a large group for weeks. Neanderthals didn't do this. Not that we've found. Their kills are smaller, more individual, one animal at a time, or a few. Why the difference? Population again. You need enough people to organize a mass hunt, enough hunters to surround a herd, enough people to process all that meat before it spoils. But it's also strategy. Modern humans were better at coordination, better at planning, better at working together in large groups. We invented tools that helped. The atlatl, a spear thrower, simple device. Wooden shaft with a hook on the end. You put your spear in it. Use it like a lever. Suddenly you can throw a spear twice as far, twice as hard. This changed everything. You could hunt from a distance, stay safe, kill animals that were too dangerous to approach, hit fast-moving targets. The atlatl made modern humans better hunters without getting stronger or tougher. Neanderthals eventually adopted the atlatl. The evidence shows this, but late, very late. After modern humans arrived, they learned it from us. But by then, we'd had thousands of years to perfect the technique. We also invented fishing technology, hooks, nets, traps, ways to catch fish in bulk, to harvest rivers and lakes and oceans. Neanderthals fished sometimes. There's evidence of it, but rarely. It wasn't a major part of their diet. Maybe because they didn't have the right tools. Maybe because they never developed the techniques. Modern humans went all in on fishing. Coastal sites show massive shell middens, piles of discarded shells 10 feet deep, evidence of thousands of meals, generations of people eating seafood. Seafood is brain food, literally. Omega-3 fatty acids, iodine, nutrients that support brain development. Some scientists think this is why modern humans developed larger brains relative to body size, why our children's brains grew faster, why we could support the energy costs of bigger brains. Neanderthal brains were big, bigger than ours actually, but they needed all that brain power for their bodies, for coordinating their heavy muscles, for processing sensory information in the cold and dark. Modern human brains could dedicate more processing power to thinking, planning, imagining, creating, because our bodies were more efficient, because our diet was more diverse, because we weren't burning every calorie just staying alive. There's also the question of storage. How do you keep food from spoiling? In Ice Age Europe, this was easier. The cold helped. You could freeze meat, keep it for weeks, even months. Both Neanderthals and modern humans did this. But modern humans went further. We invented smoking, drying, preserving fish and meat so it lasted longer, stayed edible through seasons when fresh food was scarce. There's evidence of this at modern human sites. Hearths designed for smoking meat, storage pits, places where food was kept for later, planning for the future, building reserves. Neanderthals stored food too, but less evidence of long-term storage, less evidence of preservation techniques. Maybe they didn't need it. Maybe they could always hunt fresh meat until they couldn't. And here's where food connects to population. Better food security means more children survive. Women who are well-fed have healthier pregnancies. Babies who get enough nutrition grow stronger. Children who don't go hungry reach adulthood. Modern humans had better food security, more diverse diet, more reliable sources, better storage, better tools. All of it added up to more surviving children, faster population growth. Neanderthals were always on the edge, one bad hunting season away from hunger, one harsh winter away from starvation. Their population couldn't grow as fast, couldn't recover from setbacks as quickly. There's also cooking. Both species used fire, both cooked their food, but modern humans might have been better at it. Cooking makes food more digestible, releases more calories, kills parasites, makes tough plants edible, turns inedible things into food. Modern human sites show more sophisticated hearths, better fire control, evidence of baking, roasting, boiling in skin bags with hot stones, different techniques for different foods. Neanderthals cook too, but their hearths are simpler, less variety in cooking methods. Maybe they didn't need it. Meat is meat. Cook it and eat it. Simple. But when you're eating plants and fish and everything else, you need more techniques, more knowledge, more skill. Modern humans developed that knowledge, passed it down, improved it over generations. Food is also social. Sharing food builds bonds, creates obligations, strengthens groups. Modern humans were better at this. The evidence suggests we shared food more widely, not just within family groups, between groups, trade networks where food moved from coast to interior, from valleys to mountains. Neanderthals probably shared food too, but within smaller circles, family, close kin, not the wider networks modern humans built. Those networks mattered. If your group was starving, you could trade for food, ask for help, rely on relationships built over years. Safety net. Neanderthals didn't have that safety net. Each group was more isolated, more self-reliant. When food ran short, they suffered alone. There's one more thing: waste. Modern humans were efficient. We used every part of the animal: meat for eating, bones for tools, sinew for thread, hides for clothing, antlers for weapons, fat for lamps. Nothing wasted. Neanderthals used animal parts, too, but less completely. The archaeological evidence shows more waste, more bones left with meat on them, more parts discarded. Why? Maybe because they could afford to. When game was plentiful, why bother with the scraps? Just kill another animal. But that strategy only works when game stays plentiful. When it doesn't, you're in trouble. Modern humans couldn't afford waste. We needed every calorie, every resource. That efficiency became habit, became culture, became the way we did things. And efficiency compounds. If you can get more calories from each kill, you need to kill less often, less risk, less energy spent, more time for other things, more resources for children, more population growth. The food advantage wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a single breakthrough. It was 1,000 small differences. Eating fish, using atlatls, preserving meat, sharing resources, being efficient, all of it adding up. Over time, those small differences became big ones. Modern humans were better, fed, had more children, grew faster, spread wider. Neanderthals stayed the same, stuck with what worked, what had always worked, until it didn't anymore. By 40,000 years ago, the gap was visible. Modern humans were thriving. Neanderthals were struggling. Not because they forgot how to hunt, not because the animals disappeared, because the competition changed, because someone else was eating the same food, using the same resources, and doing it more efficiently. Food is survival, but it's also more than that. It's culture, it's innovation, it's planning and sharing and adapting. It's all the things that made modern humans different. Neanderthals were amazing hunters. Tough, strong, skilled. They survived 400,000 years by being the best at what they did. But we survived by being flexible, by eating everything, by adapting to anything, by never depending too much on any one thing. In the end, that flexibility mattered more than strength. That diversity mattered more than specialization. That efficiency mattered more than power. Food didn't kill the Neanderthals, but it might have kept us alive long enough to outlast them, to grow while they shrank, to spread while they retreated. Is not the whole answer. Nothing is. But it's part of it. Another piece of the puzzle. Another reason why we're here and they're not. If you zoom out for a minute, you start to see a bigger pattern. Food is one thing. But how people connect, that's something else entirely. It's about networks, social networks. Not like Facebook or Instagram, obviously. But the idea is actually pretty similar. Groups of people linked together, sharing, talking, helping each other out, passing things along. When we talk about ancient humans, we usually picture small bands, maybe 20 or 30 people, living together, hunting together. But here's the thing. Most groups didn't stay alone. They had ties to other groups. Loose ties, but real ones. Families split up and met again. People visited cousins in other camps. News travelled farther than you'd think. Archaeologists have found proof. Tools made from stone hundreds of miles from where they were found. Shell beads from the coast, turning up deep inland. Ochre, red pigment, moved from one valley to another. None of that happens unless people are talking, trading, meeting up now and then. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's actually huge. Because these networks are safety nets. If your group has a bad year, you can turn to neighbours, ask for food, trade for tools, even join another camp for a while. It's like having backup plans, except those plans are other people. Neanderthals had some networks too, but the evidence shows theirs were smaller, closer, more local. They mostly stuck with family or close neighbours. Their tools didn't travel far. Their ornaments, if they had any, didn't move much. When things got hard, they couldn't call for help very far away. Modern humans did things differently. Our networks stretched farther. We shared more. We built ties that connected camps miles apart, sometimes even across whole regions. This made us stronger. Not stronger in our muscles, but in our connections. Let's look at what that really means. Imagine two groups, one with just close family ties, the other with friends, cousins, and trading partners scattered in every direction. Something goes wrong. A bad winter, a broken leg, a hunting accident. The first group is alone. The second can call for help. That's the difference. It's not just about food or tools, it's about ideas too. When people meet, they don't just swap things, they swap stories, tricks for making fire, new ways to hunt or fish, secrets for preserving meat or making better tools. Knowledge moves through networks just like goods do. This is how inventions spread. Someone figures out how to make a better spear point. Their neighbors see it. Try it. Show their friends. In a few generations, everyone's using it. That's how progress works. It's not just about being smart, it's about being connected. There's another piece here. Art, jewelry, beads, carvings. These things show up everywhere modern humans lived. Not just a few places, but across continents. Why? Because people valued them. They traded them. They copied new designs. Think about shell beads found hundreds of miles from the ocean. Someone had to carry them, or trade them, group by group, all the way inland. That's a long chain of people. Each step is a connection. Each exchange builds trust. Why bother with beads and art? They don't feed you. They don't keep you warm. But they're part of what makes us human. They hold meaning. They show identity. I belong here. This is my group. These are my people. That kind of thing matters. Modern human networks let art and style spread fast. New ideas didn't stay stuck in one place. They moved. They evolved. That's what you see. Similar ornaments in far-off places. It's a sign of connection, of people talking, visiting, trading. And then there's marriage. Groups didn't just trade goods, they traded people, usually through marriage. Sons or daughters would leave home, join another group. This kept gene pools healthy. It also built new ties between bands. Every marriage is a new bridge. Every child is a link to two families. Over time, networks get denser, more tangled, more resilient. If trouble hits, people have more options, more friends to turn to. It's not just about survival. Networks shape culture. Language, for example, spreads and changes as people mix. Songs and stories travel with visitors. Rituals and dances blend and shift. Networks make culture richer, more complex. When groups are cut off, things get simpler. Isolated groups forget old ways. Their language gets more basic. Their art shrinks. Their tools stay the same. But when groups stay in touch, they keep learning, they keep mixing and changing. Now let's talk about scale. Neanderthals lived in smaller, tighter circles. Their networks were short. Modern humans built wide webs. Some networks stretched hundreds of miles. That's not just a guess. The evidence is in the ground. For example, in southern Africa, people traded ostrich eggshell beads over 200 miles. In Europe, flint from one region ends up far away. In Australia, stone axes were carried up to 600 miles from where they were made. These aren't small distances, they're huge. But why does scale matter? Because bigger networks are stronger. They survive shocks better. Imagine a disease or a drought. If you know people far away, you can move, or ask for help, or learn a new trick. Small, isolated groups are more likely to disappear. This is why social networks are like invisible armor. They protect against disaster. They let knowledge flow. They build trust between strangers. They give people reasons to cooperate, not just compete. Let's get more specific. Archaeologists found proof of long-distance networks at a site called Blombos Cave in South Africa. People there made beads from snail shells. The shells came from the ocean, about 10 miles away. No big deal, right? But then those same types of beads show up much farther inland. Someone had to carry them, or trade them, one group at a time. At another site in France, they found ornaments made from mammoth ivory. The nearest mammoth herds were far away. Again, someone carried the material or the finished beads across many groups. Each step is a handshake, a promise. I'll give you this if you give me that. These networks weren't just about stuff. They were about relationships, about trust. If you break a promise, word gets around. If you help, people remember. Reputation matters. Even when there's no police or law, social pressure keeps people honest. We can see this in hunter-gatherer groups today. Among the Kung in Africa, people visit. Relatives in other camps. They share food when times are hard. They trade gifts to keep relationships alive. If someone breaks the rules, they get cut off. No one wants that. This system is ancient. It's not unique to modern times. It goes back tens of thousands of years, maybe more. There's even a theory about why humans are so good at reading faces and feelings. It's because social networks are complicated. You have to know who's a friend, who's a rival, who owes you a favor, who you can trust. That's a lot to keep track of. Scientists call this social intelligence, but really it's just people's skills, knowing how to get along, how to make deals, how to solve fights without violence. Neanderthals were smart. But maybe they didn't need these skills as much. With smaller groups, simpler networks, there's less to keep track of, less pressure to be diplomatic, less need for gossip or stories or long memories. Modern humans, on the other hand, lived in bigger webs, more people, more drama, more chances for things to go wrong or right. That drove us to get better at reading minds, at feeling empathy, at making peace. Some scientists think this is why our brains look the way they do. The parts that handle language, memory and emotion are extra large, not just for hunting or tool making, but for keeping up with all the people in our lives. Social networks change how we think. When you talk to people from far away, you become less stuck in your ways, more open to new ideas, more willing to try something different. That's how cultures grow. Now think about what happens when you lose those networks, when groups get cut off by mountains, by ice, by rivals. They shrink. They become more like Neanderthal groups, fewer connections, less news, less innovation. Some scientists think this happened during the last ice age. The climate got cold and dry, forests shrank, rivers changed course, groups got stranded in small pockets. Some vanished. Others hung on but lost touch with the wider world. But when things warmed up and the world opened again, networks snapped back into place. People started traveling, trading, mixing. New ideas spread like wildfire. That's when you see bursts of art, new tools, new ways of living. Is like a garden after a long winter. At first, not much grows. Then, suddenly, everything blooms. Let's talk about what networks mean for survival. Imagine you're living 40,000 years ago. Your group is struggling. Maybe the herd you depend on has moved away, or a sickness has swept through your camp. If you have strong networks, you have options. You can send someone to a cousin's group, a few valleys over. Maybe they have food. Maybe they'll take you in. Maybe you can trade something, a shell, a tool, a story, in return. If you don't have networks, you're trapped. You can only rely on the people next to you. If things go bad, that might not be enough. Here's another angle. Networks are good for sharing risk. Think about hunting. Sometimes a group kills more animals than they can eat right away. Other times, they get nothing. If groups share their luck, everyone does better over time. This is called food sharing, but it's really risk sharing. You help me today, I help you tomorrow. Over years it balances out. No one goes hungry for long. Modern humans were masters of this. Not just sharing inside their own group, but with neighbours, even strangers. That builds trust. It also makes life less risky. Neanderthals probably shared food too. But the evidence says they kept it closer to home. Less sharing between groups, less trading, less backup when times got hard. Now, let's look at networks and innovation. Why do some groups invent new things while others don't? Part of it is luck, but a big part is connection. When groups are linked, new ideas flow. Someone invents a fish hook. Soon, everyone in the network knows how to make bun. Someone else figures out a new way to tan hides. That spreads too. This is how technology advances, not by leaps, but by steps. One group copies another, then tweaks it. Then someone else adds a twist. Over time, the tools get better. The techniques get more clever. Isolation kills innovation. If you're cut off, you only have your own ideas. If your group forgets something, like how to make a certain tool, it's gone for good. But in a big network, someone always remembers. This is why you see bursts of creativity in places with strong networks. Art explodes. Tools change fast. People experiment, they copy, but they also create. There's a famous example from Europe. Around 40,000 years ago, people started carving animal figures out of mammoth ivory. Lions, horses, birds. Some are tiny, some are beautifully detailed. They show up across Germany, Austria, France. These aren't practical objects, they're art. They mean something. Maybe they're for rituals, maybe they're just for show. But the point is, the idea travelled. Groups shared the style, the techniques, the meaning. That only happens if people are talking across long distances, visiting, trading, marrying, telling stories. Let's not forget language. Networks help language grow and change. The more people you talk to, the more words you hear. New phrases, new jokes, new names for things. Strong networks keep language fresh. Isolated groups over time lose words. Their grammar gets simpler. Their stories get shorter. Some scientists think that the reason modern humans have such complex language is because we needed it. To keep track of all the people, all the deals, all the stories. To remember who owed what, who was related to whom, who did what and when. Language isn't just for talking. It's for thinking, for planning, for dreaming up things that don't exist yet. Networks and language feed each other. The bigger the network, the more you need language. The richer the language, the bigger the network can get. Now, here's a twist. Networks can also spread bad things. Disease, for example, or rumours, or fights between groups. But on balance, the good outweighs the bad. Networks protect more than they endanger. You can see this in modern disasters. After an earthquake or a flood, people reach out, they call friends, they check on family, they share supplies. The same thing happened in the Ice Age, just with fewer people and slower news. So, why did social networks give modern humans the edge? Because they turned a world of small risks into a web of chances. They made life less fragile, more flexible, more open to change. Neanderthals were strong, brave, skilled. But their networks were thin. Their world was smaller. When trouble came, they faced it mostly alone. Modern humans face trouble together, not just with family, but with friends, neighbours, strangers who became partners. That's the real power of networks. Over time, that power adds up. It makes groups more likely to survive, more likely to grow, more likely to invent new things and keep them. There's a saying, it's not what you know, but who you know. For ancient humans, that was literally true. Knowledge mattered, but connections mattered more. And it's not just about surviving. Networks made life richer, more interesting, more full of stories and surprises, more art, more song, more laughter. That's the legacy of social networks, not just bigger groups, but better lives, more possibilities, more dreams. If you trace the lines from those ancient networks, you end up here, in a world where people can talk across oceans in seconds, where ideas travel faster than ever, where connections, real ones, still shape who we are. And that's the secret gift of our past. We survived because we reached out, because we built bridges, not just walls, because we made friends beyond our tribe, because we shared and traded and talked. Networks let us share more than goods. They let us share ideas. So what actually flowed through those ancient networks? Not just goods and people, but ideas, innovations, culture. That's the real secret weapon. Let's dig into how that worked and what the evidence tells us. First, picture two small bands of people meeting at the edge of a river. They don't speak exactly the same language. Maybe they don't even trust each other at first, but someone notices a new way to tie a spear point, or sees a painted bead they've never seen before. Curiosity does the rest. Someone asks a question, someone shows a trick. That's how knowledge moves, not in classrooms but around campfires, face to face. You can actually see the results in the ground. Archaeologists have dug up layers and layers of stone tools. In some places, the tools stay the same for thousands of years. Simple flakes, hand axes, not much difference from one layer to the next. But in other places, suddenly there's a change. New shapes appear, finer edges, more careful work. Sometimes it's a totally new kind of tool. Take the so-called blade technology. Blades are long, thin slices of stone, sharper and more useful than rough flakes. For a long time, Neanderthals didn't make many blades. Their tools were chunky. They worked, but they didn't change much. Then, around 45,000 years ago, blades start showing up all over Europe. Fast, in cave after cave, from Spain to Russia. It's like someone turned on a switch. What happened? Most experts think it's because modern humans arrived. They brought new ways of shaping stone, but it didn't just stay in one place. The style spread, almost like a trend. Some Neanderthal sites even show signs of copying these methods. Maybe they saw humans making blades and tried to learn. But the leap was bigger than just copying. It was about sharing the know-how, explaining, passing on tips, not just objects. Blades weren't the only thing. Bone tools are another. Clue. Modern humans start making needles from bone. Tiny, sharp, perfect for sewing hides together. That means fitted clothing. Warm, tight, able to survive tough winters. In Siberia, bone needles show up in sites over 30,000 years old. Neanderthal sites almost never have them. That's not just luck. It's a sign of different habits, different ways of living. But here's the twist. Once a group invents something useful, it only matters if others can learn it. If you keep it to yourself, it dies with you. But if you share it, it can change everything. The evidence shows exactly that. In places where humans live close together, new ideas spread fast. In places where groups were isolated, things stayed the same. There's a site called Sungir in Russia. It's famous for burials filled with beads, thousands of tiny ivory beads strung into clothing. Each bead is shaped, carved, and polished. It took hours, maybe days, to make each one. The beads aren't just pretty, they're proof of patience, of planning ahead. Someone had to teach the skill. Someone had to care enough to learn. And these beads don't just show up in one grave. They appear in graves across Europe, from France to Ukraine. Different styles, sure, but the same basic idea. Stringing beads, decorating clothing, maybe even marking status or family. The trick is, these places are hundreds or even thousands of miles apart. The only way the idea gets that far is if people are talking, swapping stories, marrying across groups, carrying new styles with them. Now think about ochre. It's a red mineral, kind of like clay. People crushed it, mixed it with fat or water, and used it as paint. Sometimes for art, sometimes for body decoration, sometimes for treating hides. At Blombos Cave, in South Africa, people were using ochre over 70,000 years ago. They made patterns on rocks. Maybe it was art, maybe ritual. Either way, it's a sign of thinking beyond the basic needs. But ochre wasn't just a local thing. It pops up on tools, beads and bones all over Africa and later Europe too. Sometimes the ochre came from far away. Someone had to dig it up, carry it, and share it. That's another sign of ideas moving through networks, not just the raw material, but the meaning behind it. Here's something even stranger. In places like the Grotte du Rennes cave in France, archaeologists found ornaments, beads, pendants, even rings, mixed with Neanderthal remains. For a long time, people thought Neanderthals didn't make art at all. But now it looks like they might have copied some human tricks, at least for a little while. Maybe they saw humans wearing beads and wanted to try. Maybe they traded for them. The lines get blurry. But the pattern is always the same. Wherever you see lots of connected groups, you see more change, more new ideas, more art, more tools. The innovations don't stay stuck in one place. They move from hand to hand, camp to camp. Let's talk about music. That might sound odd, but the world's oldest known instruments are flutes made from bird bones and mammoth ivory. The oldest ones are from Germany, over 40,000 years ago. They're carefully made with carved holes for changing notes. Someone had to figure out not just how to make them, but how to play them. And that skill spread. Other caves have flutes too, though they're rare. Music isn't about survival, not directly. You can't eat a flute, but it does something else. It brings people together. It builds group spirit. It helps people remember stories or pass time during long nights. The fact that music spread means people were sharing more than just food and tools. They were sharing feelings, experiences, maybe even dreams. Now look at cave art. The famous paintings in places like Lascaux and Chauvet in France, or Altamira in Spain. These are huge murals painted deep inside caves. Horses, bison, mammoths, handprints. Some are over 30,000 years old, the same style. Pops up in distant places, sometimes thousands of years apart. That doesn't happen by accident. Someone had to invent the idea of painting animals in the dark. Someone else had to learn it. Maybe a child watched an elder mixing paint. Maybe travellers saw art in one cave, then tried it back home. The images change, but the idea stays alive. The spread of cave art is another sign of networks in action. Here's a weird detail. Many of these cave paintings use the same colours: black from charcoal, red from ochre, yellow from clay. Sometimes the exact same kind of ochre is found far from where it was dug up. That means trade, maybe even special trips just to get the best paint. That's dedication. But it's not just about making things, it's about teaching too. How do you learn to carve a bead or paint a bison? Someone has to show you. Maybe you watch, maybe you practice on scraps, maybe you make mistakes and someone corrects you. That's culture, not just what people make, but how they pass it on. You see the same thing with hunting techniques. In some places, humans started making throwing sticks, atlatls. These let you throw a spear much farther and harder. That's a big advantage for hunting. The first atlatls appeared in Australia maybe 40,000 years ago, and later in Europe and the Americas. The idea didn't stay put, it spread, group by group. People copied the design, changed it, improved it. That's innovation travelling through networks. Fishing is another example. Stone fish hooks show up in Japan over 20,000 years ago. In other places, people used bone or shell hooks. Sometimes the hooks are tiny and delicate, made for catching small fish. Other times they're big and strong for hauling in something huge. The trick is, once someone invents a hook, everyone else wants one. The idea spreads. Fishing becomes a bigger part of the diet. People settle near rivers or lakes, build traps, even dig out canoes. Let's look at fire. Making fire wasn't easy. You needed the right stones, like flint and pyrite, to strike sparks. Or you needed to master the bow drill, spinning a stick to make heat. Once a group learned a new way to make fire, the knowledge spread. Fire means warmth, safety, cooked food. It's too important to keep secret. Fire also let people work at night, sit together, tell stories, plan hunts. More hours awake means more time to share ideas, more time for children to learn from adults, more chances for inventions to take root. Now think about clothing. In cold places you needed more than just animal skins. You needed fitted clothes, sewn tight, layered for warmth. That's where bone needles come in. But sewing is a skill. You have to learn how to pierce the hide, how to thread sinew, how to patch holes. The evidence shows that fitted clothing spread fast once groups figured out how to make it. That helped humans survive in places Neanderthals never reached. Let's switch gears. What about shelters? Neanderthals built simple huts now and then, but most lived in caves or under rock shelters. Modern humans went a step further. In places like Ukraine, they built houses from mammoth bones. Huge curved tusks formed the frames, skins stretched across for walls. Inside there were hearths, storage pits, even organised sleeping spots. These weren't just random piles, they were planned. The idea of building a home with bones spread across the steppe. That's a sign of shared knowledge, not just luck. Another clue comes from tools made of antler and bone. Modern humans shaped harpoons, barbed points, even fish traps. These tools show up in many places with the same basic design. That means the idea was moving, not just the objects. Someone had to teach the trick of carving a barb or sharpening a point. There's even evidence for early art made from antler and bone. Carvings of animals, sometimes tiny and hidden in pockets, sometimes strung on a cord worn as a pendant. These little carvings aren't useful for hunting or gathering. They're symbols, maybe good luck charms, maybe signs of belonging. The fact that similar carvings show up in far-off sites means people were copying, maybe even competing to make the best one. Let's not forget about glue. That sounds boring, but it's actually a huge step. To make strong glue, you need to heat birch bark in just the right way. If you get it wrong, it doesn't work. If you get it right, you can stick stone points to wooden shafts. That makes stronger spears and arrows. Neanderthals sometimes used tree resin, but modern humans went further. They refined the recipe, taught each other the steps, shared the secret. Now, shift to food. Modern humans ate a wider range of foods than Neanderthals. They gathered roots, nuts, berries. They caught fish and birds. They stored food for winter. In some places, they even baked bread from wild grains. That takes knowledge. Someone has to know which plants are safe, how to grind seeds, how to cook them. This kind of knowledge can't be guessed. It's passed down. One mistake, and someone gets sick. But if you share what you know, everyone stays safer. There's a site called Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic. Over 25,000 years ago, people there made sculptures out of clay, then fired them in a pit. Some of the figures are animals, some are people. This is the world's oldest known ceramics. The idea didn't stay put. Fired clay objects show up in other places at other times. The know-how spread because people talked, traded, visited. Let's talk about storage. In some places, people dug pits in the ground, lined them with grass or hide, and stored nuts or seeds. That's a big leap. It means planning for the future. It also means trusting that your stash will still be there later. In bigger, more connected groups, storage makes sense. People watch each other's backs. If someone steals, word gets around, so storage and trust go hand in hand. Now shift to rituals. Burial practices changed as networks grew. Early burials were simple, just a body in a pit. But over time, people started adding beads, tools, and ornaments. Sometimes they painted the body with ochre. Sometimes they placed animal bones or carved figures in the grave. These changes spread across wide areas. The styles shifted, but the idea of honouring the dead grew. Maybe it was comfort. Maybe it was a way to show off. But it always points to shared beliefs, passed through the network. Here's another angle. Calendar marks. Some of the oldest counting sticks or bones with notches may be early calendars. People tracked the moon, the seasons, maybe even animal migrations. If you know when to hunt, when to gather, when to move, your group does better. But the trick is, counting systems change and spread. Someone invents a better way. Others copy it. Over time, the methods improve. Now, what about kids? Learning takes time. In bigger groups, kids can learn from more than just parents. They pick up tricks from aunts, uncles, older kids. They hear more stories. They see more ways to solve problems. That's a huge boost for passing on complex skills. The more teachers, the faster the learning. Let's not forget games. Some of the earliest carvings might be game pieces, little stones or bones marked or painted. Games teach strategy, patience, even math. If you look at hunter-gatherer groups today, games are everywhere. They keep kids busy, but they also pass on skills. And just like art or tools, game ideas travel. People visit, play together, carry the rules back home. Now shift to symbols. Humans started marking things, scratching lines on bones, carving patterns on stones. Some marks repeat, site after site. Maybe they're tallies, maybe clan signs, maybe something else. But the fact that the same marks show up across long distances means people were sharing meaning, not just marks. Let's talk about weapons for a minute. The bow and arrow is a huge step up from throwing spears. The earliest bows show up around 20,000 years ago, in places like Northern Europe. At first they're rare, then suddenly they're everywhere. The idea spread fast. That's not just about building a better weapon. It's about sharing the trick for shaping wood, making string, balancing the arrow. The whole process had to be taught. There's also evidence for boats. In places like Indonesia, people crossed sea gaps over 40,000 years ago, way before big ships. They must have built rafts or dug out canoes. That takes planning, teamwork, and knowledge of water. Once someone figured it out, others copied the idea. Suddenly, islands that were once empty fill up with people. That's networks in action. Look at art again. Not just paintings, but little carvings and statues. The Venus figurines are a famous example. These are small carvings of women, sometimes with exaggerated shapes. They show up from France to Russia, over a huge area. The details change, but the basic idea is the same. The same goes for animal carvings. Some are stylized, some are realistic. The style moves from place to place, group to group. Now, why does all this matter? Because every example shows the same thing. When people are connected, ideas don't just stay put. They travel, they mix, they grow. Innovations aren't lost when one group disappears. They're picked up, saved, changed, spread. It's like a web. Each group is a node. Each trade, visit, or marriage is a thread. The more threads, the stronger the web. When something good, an invention, a song, a new recipe, shows up, the web carries it everywhere. When something bad happens, a drought, a fire, a mistake, the web helps groups recover. Now, here's a big picture thought. The evidence for innovation and culture isn't just in the things people made, it's in how those things moved. The best ideas didn't stay stuck. They became part of a shared story. Some scientists call this cumulative culture. It means each generation adds a little bit, learns from the past, tweaks it, passes it on. That's how we got from flakes to blades, from hand axes to harpoons, from simple huts to mammoth bone houses. Neanderthals were smart. They made tools, hunted big animals, survived harsh climates. But their world changed slowly. Their tools stayed the same for thousands of years. Their art, if you can call it that, was rare. Their ideas didn't spread far. Modern humans were different. Our world changed fast. Our tools, our art, our music. All these things shifted, mixed, and spread. That's not just luck. It's the power of networks, the power of sharing, the power of teaching, copying, and improving. The evidence is everywhere. In beads traded across deserts, in paintings deep in caves, in songs played on bone flutes, in recipes for glue passed from one camp to another, in houses built from bones, stories told by firelight, calendars scratched on sticks. When you look at the big picture, you see a pattern. Culture isn't just what people make or do. It's how they share it, how they teach it, how they keep it alive. That's why humans, weak, slow, not the best hunters, survived and thrived. We learned to share. We learned to build on each other's ideas. We made a world where one spark could light 1,000 fires. And all this flowed through our networks. Connections weren't just for survival. They were for imagination, for memory, for dreams passed from parent to child, from friend to stranger, from one time to the next. But could Neanderthals even share ideas the way we did? Could they talk? So, everyone's heard the saying, language is what makes us human. But what does that really mean? People toss the word around all the time, but language isn't just talking. It's not just noises or words. It's the glue that holds everything together. It's how you share a secret, how you teach someone to make a spear, or tell a story by the fire, or warn about danger in the dark. But here's the big question. Did Neanderthals have language like us? Or was there something different? Something missing? For a long time, people thought Neanderthals just grunted, that they couldn't talk. Not really. That's the old cartoon version, big, hairy, and silent. But the truth is a lot more complicated, and a lot more interesting. Let's start with what we know about Neanderthals' bodies. Scientists have found dozens of Neanderthal skeletons. Some are almost complete. They looked a lot like us, strong, thick bones, big brains. But when you look at their skulls and throats, you see some differences. One of the main questions is about the hyoid bone. That's a little bone in your throat, shaped kind of like a horseshoe. It holds up your tongue and helps you make sounds. Humans have it, and it's important for speech. Neanderthals had a hyoid bone too. In fact, at least one Neanderthal hyoid bone found at a cave called Kibara in Israel looks almost exactly like ours. That's a big clue. It means their throats might have worked like ours. But a bone is just a bone. It doesn't tell you everything about the soft parts, like the tongue, the muscles, the vocal cords. Some scientists think the rest of the Neanderthal throat was a little different. Maybe their voice box or larynx sat higher in the throat. That would mean fewer vowel sounds, maybe a more limited range of noises. Some people think that would make their speech sound strange, or make it harder to talk fast. But here's the thing. Other scientists don't agree. They say the differences are small. Maybe Neanderthal sounded a bit different, but not by much. They could still make plenty of sounds. Maybe a little deeper, maybe a little rougher, but still enough for language. Now let's talk about brains. Neanderthals had big brains, sometimes even bigger, even than ours. But brain size isn't everything. What matters is shape and structure. The parts of the brain that handle language, like Broca's area and Wernicke's area, are important. Some studies suggest Neanderthals had these areas, or at least the brain shapes that match them. That's another point for Neanderthal language. But again, it's not open and shut. You can have the hardware, but it's the software that really matters. What did their brains do with those areas? Did they use them the same way we do? There's also the FOXP2 gene. This gene helps with speech and language. If you're missing it, you can't talk right. Neanderthals had the human version of FOXP2. That's another clue. Their DNA had the right instructions for speech. But genes aren't the whole story. They're just one piece of the puzzle. So what about the things Neanderthals left behind? Their culture, their tools, their art. If they had language, you'd expect to see some signs of it in their lives. Here's where things get interesting. Neanderthals made tools, they hunted in groups, they used fire, they buried their dead at least sometimes. All of those things need some kind of communication. You can't organize a hunt without signals or words. You can't teach someone to shape a stone without showing and explaining. But here's what stands out. Their tools changed very slowly. The same basic designs show up again and again for thousands of years. There's not much sign of teaching new tricks or sharing inventions across big distances. That could mean their language wasn't as flexible as ours. Maybe they could talk, but not in complex ways. Maybe they couldn't explain new ideas in detail. When you look at modern humans, you see a different pattern. Tools change fast. Styles jump from one place to another. Art explodes into caves and on beads and bones. That doesn't happen without strong language. You need to explain things, you need to tell stories, give instructions, pass on secrets. Some scientists think the difference was in recursive language. That's a fancy way of saying language with layers, like the man who hunted the deer that ran through the forest. You can stack ideas inside ideas. Human language does this easily. It lets us explain complicated things, tell long stories, plan for the future. If Neanderthals lacked this, their language might have been more basic. Maybe they could say, man hunt deer, or fire burn wood, but not string big ideas together. That would make it hard to teach new skills, hard to share complicated plans, hard to pass on culture. but we don't really know for sure. Maybe Neanderthals did have some kind of complex language, just not quite like ours. Maybe they sang, maybe they used gestures and signs as much as words. Now here's another clue: ear bones. The tiny bones inside your ear help you hear sounds. Scientists have studied Neanderthal ear bones. They found that Neanderthals could hear the same range of sounds as humans. That means they could hear all the important noises in speech, vowels, consonants, even soft sounds. So their hearing wasn't holding them back. Let's look at another angle. Childhood. Human kids spend years learning to talk. It's a slow process. You need patient adults around you, correcting, explaining, telling stories. That's how language gets passed down. If Neanderthal groups were smaller, or if kids grew up faster, maybe there wasn't as much time for language to grow and change. Maybe their way of teaching was more about showing than telling. And then there's memory. Language helps us remember things, not just facts, but stories, lessons, warnings. If you can tell a story about a dangerous animal or a flood, your group is safer. If you can't, the knowledge dies with you. Maybe Neanderthal language was good for the basics, but not for passing on deep memory. Some people think gestures were a big part of Neanderthal communication. Imagine a silent hunt. Hand signals, head nods, pointing. That's still communication, but it's not the same as spoken language. Spoken language is faster. It lets you share ideas in the dark, behind a rock, or when your hands are busy. Let's not forget emotions. Language helps us share feelings, comfort, anger, hope, fear. If you can talk about your dreams, your plans, your worries, you can connect. You can build trust. You can solve problems together. If Neanderthal language was more limited, maybe it was harder to form big, close groups, harder to build the kind of networks humans made. Now think about teaching. You want to show a child how to make a tool. You can hand them a rock and let them try, or you can talk them through the steps, where to hit, how to hold, what to look for. The second way is much faster. It's also more exact. Maybe that's why modern humans sped ahead. Our language let us teach quickly and to more people at once. Some scientists have tried to estimate how many words Neanderthals might have had. There's no way to know for sure. But if their language was simpler, maybe they had fewer words. Maybe their words meant more things, or changed meaning depending on the situation. Human languages use thousands of words. We make up new ones all the time. That's another sign of flexibility. Now, let's look at symbols. Humans mark things. Paintings, carvings, patterns. Each symbol stands for something. It might be a story, a person, a spirit, or a warning. To make and understand symbols, you need a shared language. You need to agree on what the marks mean. If Neanderthals made fewer symbols, maybe their language didn't support this kind of thinking as much. But here's a twist. There are a few places where Neanderthals did make marks. Scratches on bones, lines on stone. Maybe they were symbols, maybe not. Maybe we just haven't found the right sites yet. Or maybe their symbols were made from things that rotted away, wood, skin, leaves. It's hard to say. What about songs? Music is a form of language too. It has rhythm, pattern, memory. Human music is full of repetition and variation. Songs pass down stories, rules, feelings. If Neanderthals sang, we'll never know what their song sounded like. But it's possible they used music to share simple ideas, or to bring groups together. Now let's talk about distance. Language lets you talk about things that aren't right in front of you. You can warn about a lion by the river even if it's gone now. You can tell a story about an ancestor, or explain how to find a hidden spring. If Neanderthal language was limited to the here and now, maybe they struggled to pass on stories about the past or the future. Some people think this is the real difference, not speech itself, but the ability to talk about things you can't see. That's called displacement. Humans do this all the time. If Neanderthals couldn't, it would hold back planning, teaching, and imagination. Let's think about counting. Early humans probably counted on fingers, maybe used notches on sticks or bones. Counting words are hard to invent. In some modern languages, even today, people only have words for one, two, and many. The rest is just guessing. If Neanderthals didn't have words for numbers, maybe that made it harder to plan hunts, divide food, or keep track of time. Now, look at group size. Bigger groups need better language. If you only live with a few people, you can get by with simple signals. But if you're part of a band, a tribe, or a network of families, you need more words. You need ways to name people, track favours, talk about who did what. That's social glue. It keeps groups together. If Neanderthal groups were smaller, maybe their language didn't need to grow as much. Here's another thought. Gossip. Sounds silly, but gossip is important. It's how humans keep track of who can be trusted. Who's been honest, who's cheated, who's brave, who's lazy. Gossip builds alliances. It spreads warnings fast. Language makes gossip possible. The more complex the language, the more you can share. Maybe Neanderthals missed out on this tool for building strong networks. Now let's check the fossil record for mistakes. Some Neanderthal skeletons show signs of injuries that healed. Broken bones, worn teeth, arthritis. That means they cared for each other. Someone had to bring hurt people food, help them recover. That takes empathy. Maybe some kind of language helped, but maybe not as rich as ours. Here's a question. Why does language matter so much for survival? Imagine a sudden change, an ice age, a drought, a flood. If you can talk about what's happening, you can plan, you can warn others, you can remember what worked last time, you can share new ideas fast. That's the edge language gives. And language isn't just for solving problems, it's for dreaming, for making up stories, for singing, for playing. It's for thinking about things that haven't happened yet. That's a huge leap. It lets humans imagine new tools, new ways of living, even things that don't exist yet. Some people wonder if Neanderthals had myths or legends. Did they tell stories about the stars or spirits or heroes? We don't know. We haven't found any clear proof, but the lack of evidence doesn't mean it never happened. Maybe their stories were told out loud and died with them. Now think about what happens to language over time. Human languages change fast. New words appear, old ones vanish. Dialects split, merge, blend. That's a sign of constant invention. It's proof of busy minds, sharing, borrowing, playing with words. If Neanderthal language was more stable, maybe it didn't change much. Maybe it was slow, careful, passed on without much change. Here's something to think about. Modern humans sometimes invent secret languages. Kids do it for fun. Soldiers do it for battle. Traders use codes. The point is, language can be shaped, twisted, hidden, reshaped. That's the kind of flexibility that lets new ideas spread. It's one more tool for survival. Now let's check the world today. There are over 7,000 languages. Some have huge vocabularies, others just a few hundred words. But all human languages can express complex ideas. They can tell stories, explain rules, sing songs. That's the baseline. That's what makes us human. So what's the bottom line? Neanderthals probably had some kind of language. They could talk, they could teach, warn, comfort, plan. But maybe their language was simpler, less flexible, less layered. Maybe that's why their world changed slowly, while ours exploded with new ideas. But even now we can't be sure. Maybe we've missed something. Maybe there's more to the story, lost in time. The truth is, language leaves almost no trace. It's spoken, then gone. Only the echoes remain, in bones, in tools, in the shape of a child's jaw. And that's the heart of the mystery. Did language make the difference? Did words save us when the ice came? Or was it something else? All these differences might have mattered, but then the climate changed, and differences became life or death. Imagine a world colder than anything you've ever known. Not just winter, but an ice age that never seems to end. The wind howls, the sun is weak, the land is covered in snow and ice, sometimes for years at a time. Forests shrink, animals move or die, streams freeze solid. That's the world Neanderthals and early humans faced. It wasn't just hard, it was brutal. But here's the thing. The climate didn't just get cold and stay there. It swung back and forth, almost like a wild mood. Sometimes it was a little warmer, with open grasslands and herds of animals. Other times the cold came back, harder than before. These swings could happen fast, sometimes in just a few decades. Imagine growing up in a land with green summers, then watching it turn into a frozen desert before you're old. That's what these people faced. Scientists can see these changes in the Earth's layers. They study pollen trapped in mud or tiny shells deep in the ocean floor. Each layer tells a story. Warm times mean more trees, more grass, more life. Cold times leave behind dust, sand, and the bones of animals that couldn't survive. Ice cores from Greenland show the same story. Layers of snow pressed into ice. Each one holds bits of dust, ash, even air from long ago. The ice records sharp drops in temperature. Sometimes it got colder by 10 degrees in just a few years. Think about what that means for people living on the ground. One year you can hunt reindeer and mammoths, the next they're gone. The rivers dry up or freeze, plants vanish. The animals that stay are hungry, thin, and hard to catch. In some places the cold lasted for thousands of years. Other times, it warmed up for a few hundred years, just enough for forests to return. But you could never count on it. Nothing stayed the same for long. Now, Neanderthals were tough. They had to be. Their bodies were stocky, built to hold heat. Their noses were big, probably to warm up cold air. They knew how to make fires, find shelter, and hunt big animals. For over 300,000 years they survived these swings. But something changed about 45,000 years ago. That's when the climate started to go wild, flipping back and forth even faster. Archaeologists have found signs of these fast changes. In France, cave layers show summers turning to winters in just a few years. In Spain, pollen records show forests dying out, then coming back, then dying again. In Siberia, bones of reindeer and mammoths appear, then vanish, then return. These swings weren't gentle, they were sharp, fast, and cruel. Now try to picture what that does to a group of hunters. You're tracking reindeer one year. Suddenly they're all gone, replaced by tundra and cold winds. The plants you eat in spring, buried under snow. The rivers where you fish, frozen solid. You have to move, but where? The lands you knew as a child are gone. The old trails don't work anymore. Food gets scarce. Hunters have to travel farther. People get hungry, sick, tired. Babies are born weaker, if they're born at all. Elders struggle to keep up. The old ways don't work anymore. You need new ideas. Fast. Here's what the evidence shows. Neanderthals started disappearing from Western Europe first. The timing matches some of the coldest spikes in the record. In some caves, Layers of ash and burnt bones just stop. No more signs of fires or tools, just empty dirt. It's like people just walked away or vanished. But in other places you see a different pattern. Neanderthals are hanging on in small pockets. Sometimes you see their tools mixed with early human tools. Maybe they shared ideas, maybe they fought, maybe they just tried to outlast each other. Now let's talk about numbers. Scientists use old bones and stone tools to guess how many Neanderthals were alive at any time. The numbers are small, maybe only 10,000 across all of Europe, sometimes even less. For a whole continent, that's hardly anyone. When the climate turned bad, these small groups got even smaller. Modern humans, the ones who looked and thought like us, show up in Europe around 45,000 years ago. That's right when the weather went wild. They don't just arrive in one wave. It's more like trickles, bands of families moving in and out. Some settle, some move on. Their numbers are small at first, but they grow. Here's where it gets interesting. As the cold hits, you see more signs of humans and fewer of Neanderthals. In places where the climate stayed a little better, milder valleys, coastal areas, Neanderthals last longer. In the coldest places, they're gone first. It's like the climate squeezed them out, bit by bit. But what about the tools? Neanderthal tools stay the same for thousands of years. Simple stone flakes, scrapers, and points. They work, but they don't change much. When the climate shifts, you'd expect new tools to appear. Some do, but not many. It's like they're stuck with what they know. Humans, on the other hand, start making new kinds of tools. Thin blades, bone needles, fishing hooks, harpoons. They use antler and ivory, not just stone. In some places they carve tiny statues or beads. These things show up around the same time as the harshest swings in weather. Why does this matter? Because when food is scarce, you need every trick you can think of. If you can fish, you don't starve when the herds leave. If you can sew tight clothes with needles, you stay warm in the coldest wind. If you can build shelters, you can survive storms that would kill you outside. There's more. In places where the climate got really bad, you see humans moving more. They travel farther, faster. They follow the animals, cross rivers, climb mountains. They don't stay put. Their campsites are scattered, but connected. You can see the same kinds of tools showing up hundreds of miles apart. That means they're sharing ideas, maybe meeting up with other groups, maybe trading. Neanderthal sites don't show this kind of movement. Their camps are close together, usually near good hunting spots. When the animals leave, the camps vanish. There's little sign they chased herds across long distances or traded with distant groups. Now let's look at the bones. In very cold years, you find more broken bones in Neanderthal skeletons, more signs of stress, hunger and disease. Teeth show lines that mean a child was sick or starving. Some young skeletons are missing teeth or have stunted bones. That's what hunger does. In human sites, you see some of the same things, but there's a difference. More signs of survival, healed injuries, old people living longer, children who grew up strong. It's not perfect, but the numbers are better. Let's talk about shelter. Neanderthals mostly used caves. Good caves are rare. Sometimes they built simple huts from bones and hides, but not often. When the climate got bad, caves filled up with snow or ice. Sometimes the roof collapsed. In open country, there's nowhere to hide from the wind. Humans start building better shelters. They dig pits, build frames from wood or bones, cover everything with hides. Some shelters are big enough for 20 people. They use fire to stay warm. Some even have storage pits for food. That's a huge advantage when winter is long and harsh. Then there's clothing. Neanderthals wore hides, maybe just wrapped around their bodies. No needles, no thread. That works for cool weather, but not for long, bitter cold. Humans invent sewing. They use bone needles and animal sinew as thread. They make fitted clothes, shirts, pants, shoes, hats. That means they can travel farther, stay out longer, survive in places where Neanderthals couldn't. Let's look at food. Neanderthals hunted big animals, mammoths, bison, reindeer. Lots of meat, but risky. If the herds die, you starve. Humans eat anything they can find. Meat, fish, shellfish, nuts, berries, roots. In some places they dig up bulbs, grind seeds, cook food over fire. That kind of diet keeps you alive when the animals are gone. Archaeologists find fish bones, bird bones, even snail shells in human camps. All signs that humans ate whatever was around. Neanderthal camps have fewer of these. It's not that they couldn't eat them. Maybe they just didn't think to try. Let's pause and think about water. In an ice age, water isn't always easy. Rivers freeze. Snow is hard to melt. Human camps sometimes have pits lined with hides to collect melted snow or rain. In coastal places, humans may have boiled seawater to get salt. These tricks matter when you're thirsty and cold. Now, here's another sign from the Earth itself. Scientists can read the teeth of ancient people like a diary. Layers in the enamel show what people ate, and even how much stress they faced. Neanderthal teeth from cold times show more lines, more stress, more hunger. Human teeth from the same time show fewer of these marks. It looks like humans had more ways to cope. Let's talk about fire. Both groups used fire, but humans seem to have used it more often and in more places. In cold years, human camps have big fire pits, piles of burnt bones, even evidence of roasting plants. Some fires burned for months. That takes planning and fuel. Neanderthal fires are smaller, simpler, and sometimes rare. Maybe they struggled to keep fires going when wood was scarce. And here's something strange. In the last days of Neanderthals, you see more signs of fire in their camps. Maybe they learned from humans. Maybe they were trying to copy new ways. But it's almost too late. Let's look. Group size. Neanderthal groups were small, maybe 10 to 15 people, sometimes even less. Human groups were bigger, maybe 20 or more. Bigger groups can help each other, share food, take care of the sick, watch each other's backs. When things go bad, a big group has a better shot at making it through. Here's another angle. Genetics. Scientists have studied DNA from Neanderthal bones. The signs are clear. Neanderthal numbers were shrinking long before the last one died. There are signs of inbreeding, meaning groups were small and isolated. That's bad news when you face a disaster. If you get sick or run out of food, there's no one to help. Human DNA from the same time shows something else. More mixing, more variety. That means bigger groups, or more contact between groups. It means more chances to share food, ideas, and help. Now, let's think about disease. Small, isolated groups can be wiped out by sickness. If one person catches something new, it can spread fast, with no one immune. Cold, hunger, and stress make it worse. There's no clear proof, but some scientists think disease played a role in wiping out Neanderthals. Maybe humans brought new germs from far away. Maybe the cold made old diseases worse. Let's talk about babies. In tough times, babies are the first to suffer. If food is short, mothers can't nurse. Babies born weak often die young. In Neanderthal sites from the coldest years, there are fewer child skeletons. In human sites, more children survive. That means humans had some advantage. Maybe better food, better shelter, or better care for mothers. Now, think about the land itself. As the climate got colder, forests died, and grasslands spread. Then, sometimes, even the grass vanished, leaving only bare rock and ice. Animals moved or died out. Humans followed, always searching for food and shelter. Neanderthals seemed to stay put longer, maybe hoping things would get better. But the land didn't wait. It changed. Fast. And without mercy. Let's talk about the end. The last Neanderthals hung on in places like southern Spain, Gibraltar, and maybe pockets in Russia. These places were a little warmer, a little greener. But even there, the cold closed in. The last signs of Neanderthals, tools, bones, ashes, fade out around 39,000 years ago. After that, it's just humans. But here's something wild. In a few places, you find signs that humans and Neanderthals lived side by side, maybe for hundreds of years. Sometimes tools are mixed together. Maybe they traded. Maybe they fought. Maybe they even had families together. DNA from modern people shows that some of us carry traces of Neanderthal genes. So it wasn't all war and loss. There was mixing too. But in the end, only humans survived. What does all this mean? The climate crisis didn't kill Neanderthals in a single swoop. It squeezed them slowly, year by year. The cold pushed animals away. Food ran short. Small groups got smaller. Some tried to adapt, moving, copying new tools, maybe learning new tricks. But the changes came too fast, too hard. Humans had more options. They could eat more kinds of food, travel farther, build better shelters, make warmer clothes, share ideas over long distances. Bigger groups meant more help, more brains, more ways to solve problems. When the climate changed, humans changed with it. Let's look at the bigger picture. The world was a patchwork, some places deep in ice, others still green. Where it was warm, life was easier. Where it was cold, only the toughest survived. In the end, humans spread into every corner. Neanderthals faded away, leaving behind only bones, tools, and a few traces in our DNA. But climate was the test. It pushed both groups to the edge. Neanderthals survived for hundreds of thousands of years. They were strong, clever, and brave. But when the world changed too fast, they couldn't keep up. Humans, with their new ways, new tools, and bigger networks, made it through. There's something haunting about it. The wind, the ice, the darkness. People huddled around a fire, listening to the world change outside. Some made it, some didn't. And in the end, the world belonged to those who could adapt, share, and dream of something new. The climate crisis forced a choice: change or disappear. Humans changed. Neanderthals didn't change fast enough. The story is written in the earth, the bones, and the silence that followed. But was climate the only reason? Or was there something else waiting in the shadows? Something that finished what the ice began? It's easy to imagine the end of the Neanderthals as a single moment, a last campfire, a final family huddled against the cold. But real history is messier. It's not a neat finish line. It's more like a river fading into a swamp, little by little, until there's nothing left to see. Let's zoom in on those final years. Picture southern Spain, around 40,000 years ago. The land is rough, dotted with limestone hills and thick patches of scrub. The sea is close. It's warmer here than in the frozen north. If you're a Neanderthal, this is the last safe place. The ice hasn't swallowed it yet. There's still game to hunt and caves for shelter. Archaeologists have found signs of these last holdouts in places like Gibraltar. There are stone tools, hearths with blackened ash, and bones from deer and rabbits. Some caves have marks on the walls, almost like doodles, maybe the oldest art ever made by a Neanderthal hand. These places feel haunted. You can almost picture the last families clinging to the old ways, hoping the world will turn kinder. But outside, things are changing fast. Humans, people who look and think like us, are moving in. Their camps are close, sometimes just a day's walk from the last Neanderthal shelters. Their tools are different. Their ways are new. In one cave called Gorham's Cave, the sign stops suddenly, the ashes and bones end. The tools change. After that, only human traces remain. This isn't just a story from Spain. Across Europe and Western Asia you see the same thing. Neanderthal camps shrink, then vanish. Human sites grow bigger, spread wider. The last Neanderthals hang on in the edges, the far north, the Wild West, the tip of a peninsula. When you look at the map, it's like watching a tide go out for the last time. Now, let's look at what the bones and dirt tell us. When scientists dig in these final Neanderthal sites, they find fewer and fewer people. Sometimes just one family, maybe even a single person. The tools look worn out. Bones show signs of hunger. Thin arms, crooked spines, teeth with deep lines from sickness. There are broken bones that never healed. Sometimes you see cuts that might be from violence. The animal bones in these caves change too. Early on there are big game animals, red deer, horses, even a stray bison. But as time goes on, the bones shrink. More rabbits, birds, and shellfish. That's what you eat when the good food is gone. It's a sign of desperation. Now, zoom out for a second. Think about what it means to be the last of your kind. You've known the land all your life. You've walked the same trails, watched the same stars. You know every cave, every spring, every tree that gives fruit. But suddenly nothing feels safe. The animals are gone, the weather is wild, and strangers appear. People who move differently, talk in ways you don't understand, make things you've never seen. What do? Some Neanderthals seem to have hidden. Their sites are tucked into hard-to-find caves deep in the hills. Others may have tried to fight. There are skulls with cracks that could be from weapons. Some may have tried to join the newcomers. There's evidence of mixing, bones with both Neanderthal and human traits, DNA that shows a blend. But the numbers are stacked against the Neanderthals. By the end, there may have been only a few. 100 left, scattered across a continent. Small groups can't last forever. One bad winter, one outbreak of sickness, and the line ends. Let's talk about the last Neanderthal child. No one knows their name or what they looked like. But there's a famous skeleton found in Portugal, called the Laga Velho child. The bones are around 24,000 years old, much younger than the last pure Neanderthals, but they show something strange. The child has a mix of features. Some are Neanderthal, strong arms, thick bones. Others are human, delicate chin, small teeth. Scientists argue about what this means. Was this a child of a mixed family? Was it just a coincidence? Either way, it's a sign that the borders between groups weren't always clear. Now let's look at the tools left behind. In the last Neanderthal sites, you find a mix of old and new. Some tools look just like the ones made thousands of years before. Simple scrapers, chunky points, nothing fancy. But sometimes you see copies of human tools, thin blades, even a few bone points. Maybe the Neanderthals saw what the newcomers were doing and tried to copy them. Maybe they traded for blades or found them left behind. But the copies are never quite the same. It's like trying to learn a new language as an adult. You can do it, but it's hard. The old habits stick. Scientists have a name for these last tools. The Châtelperronian. They show up in France and Spain, right before the Neanderthals vanish. Some people think these tools prove Neanderthals could innovate given a push. Others say they only made them after seeing humans do it. Either way, it's a last spark before the fire goes out. Let's talk about what the world looked like in those final days. The Ice Age was at its peak. Summers were short and cold. Winters lasted most of the year. The land was open with few trees. Winds blasted across the plains carrying stinging dust. In the north, glaciers covered everything. Even in the south, the nights were freezing. There were wildfires, floods, and storms that could strip the land bare. Animals were on the move, always searching for food. The land itself seemed to be in a mood, restless, changing, never calm for long. In this world, every day was a struggle. You needed friends, skills, and a bit of luck. For a small group, it was almost impossible to make it through year after year. If you got sick, or hurt, or just unlucky, there was no one to help. Now, let's talk about the theories for how the end came. Some scientists say it was slow, starvation and cold, one family at a time. Others think there was violence, fights over land or food, small wars that left no trace but broken bones. There's even a theory about volcanoes. Around 40,000 years ago, a giant eruption in Italy blasted ash all across Europe. The sky turned dark, plants died, game animals vanished. Maybe Neanderthals, already struggling, couldn't survive that extra blow, and then there's the theory of disease. When humans moved into Europe, they may have brought germs Neanderthals had never faced. Small groups, already weak, can be wiped out by sickness in just a few months. There's no proof, but it's possible. But here's what almost everyone agrees on. The end wasn't one thing. It was a stack of problems, climate, hunger, small numbers, maybe fights, maybe sickness. Each one alone might not have finished the Neanderthals, but together they made it impossible to last. Let's look at what happened after. When the last Neanderthals vanished, humans spread out even faster. The same caves, the same hills, the same rivers. Now only humans lived there. Their camps grew bigger. Their tools became more advanced. Art appeared on cave walls, handprints, animals, swirling patterns. Bones show people living longer, surviving wounds, raising children to adulthood. But the story isn't just about humans replacing Neanderthals. There's another layer, remember the DNA, in our bones. Most people outside Africa have a tiny bit of Neanderthal in their genes. It's like a ghost carried forward. Some scientists think this DNA helps with things like fighting infection or coping with cold. It's a small, strange gift from a lost people. Let's talk about memory. For thousands of years, no one remembered the Neanderthals. Their bones lay buried, their tools hidden under dirt and rock. It wasn't until the 1800s that people digging in a German valley found thick, strange bones and wondered what kind of human they belonged to. That's where the name Neanderthal comes from. Neander Valley. At first, people thought these bones belonged to monsters or sick humans, or even ancient warriors. It took decades to realize they were something else. A cousin, not a parent. A branch of the human family tree that ended long ago. Since then, we've found hundreds of Neanderthal bones, skulls, teeth, even tiny bits of DNA. Each one is a clue. Each one tells a piece of the story. But here's a question. What would the world be like if Neanderthals had survived? What if there were still two kinds of people walking the earth? Would we have shared ideas, lived together, fought forever? No one knows. Some writers and scientists like to imagine it. Maybe Neanderthals would have built their own villages, made their own art, sung their own songs. Maybe they'd have joined with humans, mixing slowly until the differences faded. Or maybe they'd have stayed apart, a hidden people in the forests and mountains. But the truth is, they're gone. All that's left are bones, tools, and a little DNA. The world changed. They couldn't change fast enough. Let's look at the meaning of this ending. It's tempting to see it as a story of winners and losers, but that's not quite right. Neanderthals survived for hundreds of thousands of years through ice, fire, and hunger. They were tough, smart, and brave. They made tools, cared for their sick, buried their dead. That's not failure. That's survival against the odds. We can't know what their last thoughts were. Maybe they worried about their children, or hoped for better days, or dreamed of things we'll never understand. Maybe they looked at the stars just like we do, and wondered what lay beyond. Their story is our story too. We're here because we kept changing, kept trying new things, kept reaching out to others. Maybe that's the secret. Not strength alone, but the ability to adapt, to work together, to imagine a world that could be better. The end of the Neanderthals isn't just a loss, it's a reminder. Change is always coming. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's sudden, but it never stops. If you walk through the hills of Spain or France today, you might pass a cave where the last Neanderthal once slept. You'd never know. The wind blows, the grass grows, birds call from the trees, the world moves on. But deep under your feet, in the dark earth, their bones still rest. Their story waits, quiet but not forgotten. Here's what's strange. Even though the Neanderthals are gone, their echoes are all around us. In the shape of a skull here, a tool there, a stretch of DNA in someone's blood. Pieces that remind us we're not the only story Earth has ever told. The end wasn't a single night or a single battle. It was a slow fading, a long goodbye. A family here, a mother there, a child lost to cold or hunger or the unknown. The Earth remembers even when we forget. So when you hear about lost worlds and vanished people, remember the Neanderthals. They were here. They lived, loved, and struggled, just like us. Their story is part of us, written in bones, blood, and memory. And as the last traces of their fires went cold, as the world changed shape once more, something else began. A new chapter. Humans, alone now, faced a world full of new dangers and new chances. The story didn't end. It just turned a page. But if you look closely, you can still see the signs. A ridge on a skull, a pattern of scratches on a cave wall, a thread of DNA winding through time. The Neanderthals may be gone, but in a way they're still here, living on in small ways, carried forward by the people who came after. And that brings us to the next mystery. If they're gone, why do they still matter so much? Why do we keep searching for their faces in the past and their traces in ourselves? Maybe it's because deep down we know. The story of the Neanderthals is a story about what it means to be human, to face change, to survive, and to leave something behind, even if it's only a whisper in the dark. They're gone. But are they really? Here's something wild. Even though Neanderthals are gone, they left more behind than you might think. Not just bones in caves or strange tools buried in the ground. They left pieces of themselves in us, in the way some of us look, in the way our bodies fight off certain illnesses, even in little quirks that pop up in everyday life. It's like they slipped us a few notes before they vanished, tiny messages hidden in our blood. So how do we know this? Let's start with DNA. Scientists first pulled Neanderthal DNA out of bone powder in the 1990s. It was a huge deal. Before that, Neanderthals were just fossils. After that, they were family. Here's what's cool. Almost everyone whose family roots are outside of Africa has some Neanderthal DNA. Usually it's about 1 to 2%. Not much, but it's there. If you have ancestors from Europe, Asia or the Middle East, you probably carry a bit of Neanderthal in your genes. What does this mean? It means there was mixing. Our ancestors and Neanderthals didn't just pass by each other in the woods. Sometimes they met, talked, and probably had families together. Their children survived, and those genes kept moving down the line. It's not just a story about one group fading away, it's a story about blending, about old worlds mixing into new ones. Now, let's talk about what these Neanderthal genes actually do. Some of them help our bodies fight viruses and bacteria. There's a gene that helps the skin heal after a cut. Neanderthals passed that on. Some genes affect how we react to sunlight or cold. There's even a connection to how our bodies handle fat and sugar, which might have helped Neanderthals survive tough winters. Today, those same genes can sometimes cause trouble. There are links between Neanderthal DNA and things like allergies, certain types of depression, even how we process pain. Think about that for a second. A cough, a freckle, a bad reaction to pollen. Sometimes it's not just about you. It's about an ancestor who lived 40,000 years ago. Someone who shivered in a cave, wrapped in furs, hoping to make it through another icy night. Their struggles still echo inside us, in ways we barely notice. Let's go deeper. There's a story in our immune systems. Neanderthals lived in Europe and Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They faced all kinds of germs that didn't exist in Africa. When humans moved into these new lands, they picked up Neanderthal genes that helped them survive local diseases. It was like getting a starter pack for a new world. Some scientists think this was a big reason why humans spread so fast across Europe and Asia. The Neanderthal genes gave us a boost, but it's a double-edged sword. The same genes that helped with old diseases can sometimes make us more likely to get sick today. For example, some Neanderthal DNA is linked to a higher risk of getting really sick from modern viruses, like the one that causes COVID-19. It's a strange twist. What helped our ancestors survive could make us more vulnerable now. Now, let's look at something you can see in the mirror. Some people have features that hint at ancient ancestors, a certain shape to the skull, a bump at the back of the head, heavy eyebrows, even the way hair grows. These traits aren't proof by themselves, but they're clues. They remind us that our family tree isn't straight. It's a tangled mess, with branches crossing and joining, splitting and meeting again. And then there's the story written in our skin. Neanderthals had lighter skin than early humans from Africa. Their genes for pale skin and red hair are found in some people in Europe today. It didn't just happen by chance. These traits helped people handle less sunlight, making it easier to get enough vitamin D in cloudy, cold places. So if you have pale skin or red hair, that's one more way the past lives on. Let's move from our bodies to our minds. This is where things get really interesting, and a bit weird. Some scientists have found links between Neanderthal genes and how our brains work. Not big things, like intelligence, but small things. Sleep patterns, for example. Some Neanderthal DNA can make people more likely to be night owls or more sensitive to the changing seasons. Other genes are tied to mood or how we handle stress. It's not destiny, just little nudges. But it means the Neanderthals are still shaping us, even in the dark, quiet part of our minds. Now you might wonder, what about culture? Did we get any ideas or habits from Neanderthals? That's a tricky one. We know they made tools, built fires, and maybe even wore jewellery or painted cave walls. But we can't say for sure if any of their traditions survived. Ideas are harder to track than bones or genes. Still, every once in a while archaeologists find something odd. A tool or a piece of art that looks like a blend of both worlds. Maybe it's a hint of old knowledge passed down, quietly, through families that remembered both sides. Here's another angle. Neanderthals weren't the only ancient cousins we met. There were others, like the Denisovans, another group of humans who lived in Asia. People in places like Tibet, Papua, New Guinea, and Australia carry Denisovan DNA. Sometimes people have both Neanderthal and Denisovan genes mixed up together as like a patchwork quilt. Every person is a little different. The world's family tree is more tangled than most people imagine. And these ancient cousins helped us in surprising ways. For example, people living high up in the Tibetan mountains have a Denisovan gene that helps them breathe thin air. Without it, living at those heights would be much harder. So even though Denisovans are gone, their legacy helps people survive in places where most of us would struggle. Let's talk about what this means for identity. For a long time, people imagined ancient history as a series of clean lines. This group, this culture, that one. But the evidence says it's not so simple. There's no single us or them. Everyone's story is a mix. We're all patchwork, shaped by thousands of years of meeting, mixing, and moving. It's not just about DNA either. It's about what we carry forward, the ways we adapt, the knowledge we share, the courage to move into new worlds, even when it's risky or strange. That's what humans are good at, blending, changing, finding new ways to survive. Now, let's zoom out for a minute. Imagine a map of the world, not with borders and cities, but with lines showing families moving, splitting, joining over tens of thousands of years. Some lines cross in Europe, where humans and Neanderthals met. Others twist through Asia, where Denisovans wait in the shadows. Over time the lines blur. There are no pure groups, just waves of people carrying old stories, old strengths, old weaknesses, and the map keeps changing. New DNA studies come out every year. Sometimes they turn old ideas upside down. A few years ago, scientists found a tiny piece of bone. A girl who had a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. A first-generation hybrid, living in a cave in Siberia. She's proof that these meetings weren't rare. They happened again and again, over thousands of years. Let's shift gears and talk about how we see the Neanderthals today. For a long time, they were painted as slow, dumb, or brutish. People laughed at the idea that Neanderthals could do anything clever or creative, but the more we learn, the more that picture falls apart. They made glue from tree sap, shaped sharp blades, maybe even played music on hollowed bones. In some caves, you find traces of buried bodies, carefully placed, sometimes with flowers or tools. That takes feeling, that takes thought. So, when we talk about Neanderthals living on, it's not just in our bodies. It's in the way we look at what came before. Every new discovery asks us to see our ancient cousins as people, not monsters or failed experiments, but survivors, explorers, makers of meaning. Their story changes how we see our own. Now, you might ask, what do we do with all this knowledge? Does it matter that you have a bit of Neanderthal DNA? Does it change anything about your daily life? Maybe not in obvious ways. But it does give us a sense of connection. It reminds us that the line between past and present isn't as sharp as it seems. We're part of a long, winding story. Every breath we take, every step we make is built on choices and chances from long ago. Let's talk about the science for a second. The process of finding Neanderthal DNA is not easy. Bones have to be protected from contamination. Scientists use tiny drills to get powder from deep inside. The DNA they find is often broken, mixed with dirt, animal bits, and even modern human DNA. It takes years to piece it all together, but once they do, it's like opening a message in a bottle. Words from a world that vanished long before the first city, the first farm, the first written word. And what about the future? As science gets better, we'll probably find more secrets. We may even learn about other lost cousins we haven't discovered yet. Every new bone, every tiny scrap of DNA could change the story again. It's a reminder that history isn't finished. It's still being written, even as you listen to this now. Let's pause for a moment and think about what it means to carry the past inside us. It's easy to feel far away from people who lived in caves, chased mammoths, and watched the stars with no names. But the truth is, they're closer than we think. Their struggles, their hopes, and even their mistakes helped shape the world we live in. When you get a cold, when you catch a sunburn, when you feel restless on a long winter night, sometimes that's the echo of a Neanderthal whispering through time. One last thing. Sometimes people ask, if Neanderthals are still part of us, are they really gone? It's a good question. In some ways, yes, they're not walking around, making fires, telling stories by the light of a cave. But in other ways, they're not gone at all. They're in your cells, in your family, in the way humans have learned to survive again and again. History isn't just what's lost. It's also what's carried forward, hidden in plain sight. And that's the living legacy of the Neanderthals. Not just a chapter in a book or a pile of old bones, but a piece of who we are. A reminder that every person, every family, every group that ever lived has left a mark. Some marks are big, paintings on a cave wall, tools buried in the ground. Others are small, a gene, a memory, a story told by firelight. We're all part of that chain, and as long as people walk the earth, the story keeps going. Maybe that's the real message the Neanderthals left behind. Not a warning or a farewell, but a quiet hope that nothing is ever truly lost as long as someone remembers, as long as something survives. So where does all of this leave us? Why does the story of humans and Neanderthals matter beyond just some ancient puzzle pieces? Let's step back and look at the big picture for a minute. We started with a question. Why did humans survive when Neanderthals were stronger? The answers took us all over the map, through brains, culture, weather, even the way we share and blend. But at its heart, this story is really about change, about what it takes to last. Think about how much the world shifted during the time of Neanderthals and early humans. Ice ages came and went. Forests turned into grasslands, then back again. Animals vanished and new ones appeared. The rules kept changing, and the groups who survived weren't always the biggest or the toughest. They were the ones who could bend, who could try new things, who could turn a bad year into a fresh start. That's one of the big lessons from the Neanderthal story. Being strong helps, but it's not everything. Sometimes sharing ideas matters more. Sometimes the group that's willing to copy a neighbour or trade for a better tool is the one that gets through the next hard winter. And sometimes survival is just about sticking together, trusting that the group can do what one person can't. You can see this lesson all through history, not just in the Stone Age. Fast forward a few thousand years. People invent farming. Some groups try it, and their world changes forever. Others stick to hunting and gathering. The farmers grow in number. They settle down, build villages, and raise families. The world tilts in a new direction. Not because farming is better in every way, but because it lets people try something different. It's the same pattern. Change, adapt, survive. Now, let's pull this idea apart a bit more. What does it really mean to be adaptable? It's more than just learning a new trick. It's about being willing to fail and to try again. It means seeing a new idea, even if it looks strange or risky, and giving it a shot. Sometimes it means letting go of old habits, even if they worked in the past. Neanderthals were good at surviving. They lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. That's not a sign of failure, that's amazing. Most species don't last nearly that long, but when the world changed fast, when the climate got harsh, when new people showed up with new tools, it was the groups who could shift gears who made it. Humans tried new foods, new ways of living, new ways of thinking about the world. Sometimes those experiments failed, but enough of them worked. Here's something else to chew on. The story of Neanderthals isn't just about them disappearing, it's about how we remember the ones who are gone. For a long time, every group thought they were the center of the story, the chosen ones, the only real people. But the more we learn, the more we see that everyone's story is tangled up together. It's a little humbling, isn't it? To realize that winning at survival doesn't mean you're the best or the smartest. Sometimes it just means you were there when the dice rolled your way, or you were standing close enough to someone who had what you needed, or you were willing to try something new even if it was weird or scary. Let's look at this from another angle. All through history, people have asked, what makes us human? Is it our brains, our language, our art? Maybe it's none of those things by themselves. Maybe it's the mix, the weird, messy blend of strengths and flaws, hopes and fears, old ideas and new risks. Maybe being human is about never being finished, always learning, always changing, always carrying pieces of the past into the future. That's true for our bodies too. We carry Neanderthal genes. We carry genes from even older ancestors. Every cell in your body is full of history. But it's not just a story about old bones or ancient DNA. It's about the way each generation takes what came before and makes something new. Think about your own life for a second. How many things do you do because someone before you tried it and it worked? The food you eat, the words you speak, the stories you tell, even the way you solve problems or handle tough days. Most of those things came from people you never met. Some of them lived before there were countries or cities or even writing. Their choices echo through you right now. Now, imagine the world 100 years from now. What will people remember about us? What will they carry forward? It probably won't be every single detail. Most names will fade, most stories will shrink or change, but a few things will last. Maybe a way of thinking, or a habit, or a bit of wisdom passed down by accident. Maybe something you do every day will help someone survive in a world you can't even picture. That's what makes the Neanderthal story so powerful. It's not just about loss. It's about what gets carried forward, even when we don't notice it. Things change, people disappear, but parts of them keep moving in ways no one can fully see. Let's talk about the bigger picture for a minute. Humans are good at looking for patterns. We want to know why things happen, why some groups rise and others fall, why some survive and others vanish. But sometimes there isn't just one reason. It's a whole web of luck and choice and chance. It's the weather, the tools, the neighbours, the way a group treats its children or listens to its elders. Neanderthals had their own world, just like we have ours. Their challenges were different, but the big questions were the same. How do you find food? How do you stay warm? Who do you trust? What do you teach your children? Those questions never really go away. And here's something else. The past isn't just a list of dates or facts. It's full of mysteries, things we may never fully solve. Sometimes the best we can do is wonder. That's okay. Mystery gives us room to grow. It keeps us curious. It reminds us that every answer leads to more questions. So, what do we do with these old mysteries? We can learn something from the way scientists and archaeologists work. They dig carefully. They look for clues. They build stories out of tiny scraps, and they admit when they don't know. They argue, they change their minds, they start over. It's not a straight line. It's a winding path, full of surprises. Maybe that's the real lesson from the story of humans and Neanderthals. Survival isn't about being perfect. It's about being open to change, willing to listen, ready to share, and ready to start again when things fall apart. Let's not forget, Neanderthals were people too. They loved, they struggled, they dreamed. We may not know their names, but we know they mattered. Every tool, every fire, every bit of paint on a cave wall was a step into the unknown. That's something we share, even now. And here's the thing, the world keeps changing. New challenges will come. Some will be big, some small. But the story isn't finished. As long as people remember, as long as we wonder about the past, as long as someone is willing to try something new, the chain goes on. So next time you look in the mirror, or walk outside on a cold day, or see a new discovery in the news, remember, you're part of a story that's millions of years old. You carry secrets and strengths from people you'll never meet. Their hopes are still alive in ways you might not even notice. And when you face something hard, something that feels too big, remember how many times people before you faced the unknown. They crossed frozen rivers, built new homes, learned words for things they'd never seen. Sometimes they failed. Sometimes they made it through, but every step changed the path for the ones who came next. That's what it means to be human, to carry the past but not be trapped by it, to honour what came before but still find new ways forward, to know that even if something is lost, its shadow can shape what comes next. In the end, the story of humans and Neanderthals is a story about survival, but also about meaning, about what we leave behind and what we carry forward, about the quiet ways we're all connected, even when we feel alone. It's the story of hope, really, the hope that something good can last, that even in a world full of loss and change, some part of us endures, not just in bones or genes, but in kindness, in courage, in the simple act of trying again. So, as you drift off tonight, remember this. You're part of an unbroken chain. You are the living memory of 1,000 worlds. The past isn't gone. It's alive, whispering in every heartbeat, every breath, every dream. And the story isn't finished. There's still more to come. Let that thought settle, gentle and quiet. The world grows softer. The mysteries fade to the edges. You're safe in the long story of us, carried forward by everyone who came before. The darkness is full of memories, but also promise, because every night is followed by a new day, and every ending is just a new beginning waiting to be found.